Roland finds herself in a recurring dream again. A shuddering scream, the smell of blood slowly spreading through the air, someone's mad laughter, a cooling body, and a girl who could only watch from the sidelines were in that horrible nightmare. In the morning, the maids were surprised to find Mrs. Roland already on her feet, working hard at such an early hour. The noblewoman's efforts solved absolutely all the affairs of the estate, even the most unpleasant ones. Now the girl had become an indispensable support of the Count D's family. The maid informed the girl that they could leave after lunch as planned. The maid was worried about her mistress, as she hadn't slept much due to her nightmares, but Roland asked not to worry, saying she could take a nap while they were on the road. The noblewoman didn't understand the point of holding a grand triumphal banquet, which would be attended by all the nobility. Anyone who saw the girl wondered why the noble lady, who had not yet inherited the title, was so zealous about her family. The reason for such questions was the empty seat of the head of the Count D's family. The Count's ill-invested money turned into debt, which soon led to bankruptcy. After this, Father Roland left the house at some point and never returned. The grief-stricken mother, who had never been noted for her good health, went to bed, so only the heroine was able to take responsibility for her family, which was up to its ears in debt. She had to be responsible for the affable Betty, who always brewed fragrant tea, and the somewhat odd but naive Anna, as well as the thoughtful butler Wilson, along with the rest of the servants of the Earl's residence. Roland wanted to protect the family members she held dear. It had been 3 years since she had made that decision. During this time, she had sold off unnecessary things, budgeted night after night, and tried her best to reduce the price of food purchases. In any case, the girl has withstood all the trials with dignity. Roland came to see her mother, who had recently taken some medicine and was feeling a little better. She was very sorry that because of her illness, she could not keep her daughter company. The girl did not stop working hard, causing the Countess's heart to be full of excitement. At the banquet, Roland will have to face for the first time the need to make connections in the community, for the sake of taking care of the county. The girl had promised her mother that she would have fun, but it proved impossible to enjoy the trip. The noblewoman's maid was pulling the girl away from the counter, who was indignant that one fruit cost a whole silver coin. In their county, one could buy 5 fruits for the same money. In Roland's opinion, they had a problem with travel expenses, which might not be the only expense. As the prices were very high, the girls began to worry about the cost of housing. They could find themselves in a tight spot if they spent more than they had planned. It was too much for Roland to buy fruit for 1 silver, so she didn't understand who was buying at such prices. Because of a grand banquet or something like that, prices skyrocketed as there were now a lot of people flocking to the capital. All the townspeople lined the sides of the street and began to praise the knights of the Empire who were returning from their next mission. Suddenly, in the midst of the convoy, Roland saw the very man who had been brutally murdered in her dream. The girl's maid had never thought that she would see the Duke of Benerit, about whom there were many rumours. Hearing the conversation between the ladies, the peasant girl decided to tell about the man. Duke Benerit was known as the Shining Knight, leading the strongest order of knights who had once won the war against demonic creatures. The man was a guardian of the Empire, chosen by the sacred sword of Eoshit. All the girls of the city were enamoured with the young nobleman's looks. At that moment, Rolina realised that the man who was appearing in her dreams was Duke Beneritus. The girl did not feel well, and she hastily took refuge in an alley. She stopped and thought that she would soon be able to find out the reason why she was haunted by the same nightmare. Roland became worried, for if the dream was a dream, then soon the Duke was to be killed. Then the dreams she had seen would turn out to be reality. After the girl made the decision to protect her family, she almost died. Then also, at the crossroads of life and death, she managed to see her past life. Hundreds of years ago, the god of night and darkness Nevan existed, and Roland had been his priestess in her past life. After the girl woke up, she didn't remember much of the rest of her life, but she was sure she had seen the memories of the past. After that incident, something strange happened to the heroine. The powers she possessed when she was a priestess of Nevan in her previous life manifested themselves now. And it was then that the girl regained the ability to predict the future through dreams. The girl's maid was very worried about the noblewoman, but she said she was just tired and would go to bed early tonight. Rowlena saw the girl off and began to think about what to do next. The events she had dreamed about were the future, which meant that the Duke would soon be killed. Before that, the future that the heroine saw in dreams only concerned her inner circle. The power to predict the future through blurred dreams helped the girl protect her family, even though Rowlena was only the Count's child. She couldn't do anything to stop what was happening in her dreams because she didn't know who the man was. Now the girl was sure that it was Duke Dante van Benerit. The heroine simply could not allow the death of a hero of the Empire. While she was ruling her lands, she figured out what was going on in the Empire. As the Emperor's condition was deteriorating due to illness, the Empire was going to appoint a regent. The first candidate was the princess, the Empress's daughter, and the second candidate was the prince, the Queen's child. These two were constantly vying for power, as they both aspired to the post of regent. At the centre of all this struggle was the Duke. The support of the people and the church was a significant advantage in this battle. Everything could turn upside down depending on which side the Duke chooses. If the nobleman falls, the pillar that supports the entire empire will also fall with him. Once all this happens, there is a high probability that the power struggle within the imperial family will end in a devastating war. The consequences would not bypass Rowlena's family's holdings either. The girl couldn't let that happen when she knew what was about to happen. To prevent the death of Duke Benerit, she had to change the future. The heroine travelled to the imperial palace. At the entrance, the butler checked the invitation and then decided to give a tour of the palace. Rowlena wished with all her might to prevent the Duke's death. In her dream, it looked like the man was in the palace, as the girl recognised the corridor where the murder had taken place. The butler kept talking about the covers of the ancient books, from which you could immediately tell that they were in the Emperor's famous library. After learning more about the library, the heroine went to study the books that might contain information from her dreams. In one of the books, Rowlena noticed an unusual painting. The girl touched it and found herself locked inside it. In the middle of the garden was resting Duke Benerit, which made heroine uncomfortable, as she did not realise where she was now. Heroine began to think that even when a man is asleep, his face is still exquisite. Suddenly, the Duke woke up and began to ask Rowlena who she was and how she had come to his estate. The girl thought that this might be their only meeting, so she had to tell the man everything that had happened in her dream. Dante began to say that this place was accessible only to the members of the imperial family and a few cronies. The heroine assured that she got here by accident, but the man did not believe her, as there were imperial guards at the entrance, so there was no way the girl could have come to him by accident. The Duke had convinced the girl that if she did not find a proper explanation, he could easily accuse her of a crime. Rowlena couldn't believe that the man was so unemotional. Even if she told him that he was going to be killed, he still wouldn't believe the heroine. In that case, the girl decided that she would consider this meeting as her opportunity, since she had already decided to change the future anyway. The action is moved to a time when the Duke had already resigned himself to not being able to get into the chancery. There was nothing the man's counsellor could do about it. The Duke returned after a year and a half of absence, which made everyone eager to see him. Dante thought that after the war, people in the Empire were doing useless things. While the army was on the battlefield, the situation in the imperial family had changed a lot. The Emperor's condition had deteriorated to the point where he couldn't even go out to see his guests. The counsellor told the Duke that the heir to the throne had not yet been determined, and everything revolved around a few candidates, making the situation more like chaos. As the Duke returned to the capital, the balance of power was about to be shaken. As the man had the support of the people and the church, as well as being a member of the Benerit family, who had protected the imperial family for generations. Whichever side the Duke chose, his decision would change the future of the entire empire. Dante could not work in the chancery in such an environment, so he left all the work to his assistant and went to the garden. Presently, The man thought he had come to the garden to avoid the annoying aristocrats. But still, an unforeseen circumstance occurred. Rowlena began to say that she didn't really have to explain anything, and she was just lost. And if a man doubted her words, he could easily check everything. Dante wanted to do as the heroine said, but now he had no desire to do it. Unlike the insects that spoke to the Duke, Rowlena didn't faint or try to suck up to him. Even such behaviour did not cancel the fact that the girl was just as much an insect to Dante as everyone else. The Duke did not blame the heroine and asked the guards to escort her home. Rowlena fled, whereupon Dante noticed the jewellery dropped by the girl. As soon as the Duke bent down to pick up the jewel, his holy sword Eoshita reacted. At home, Heroine was pestered by a servant girl with questions, as she wondered why the girl was hovering in the clouds after the palace. The girl began to understand why so many people rejoiced at the Duke's return. His presence could shine a light on an entire village. Rowlena decided to return to her task, because to protect her family, she had to change the future in which the Duke dies. The noblewoman quickly wrote a letter and asked the maid to pick her a dress that exuded innocence. After Dante was told that Count Diaz's daughter had come to him, he began to wonder what the girl wanted from him. The butler reported that the heroine said that she came to the man to thank him for his help in the garden. The man hurried outside, where Rowlena thanked him for his quick response to her request. The Duke decided not to stall for time, so he offered to come to the manor and discuss everything. Dante decided to see if the girl really wanted to thank him. Rowlena was concerned that the Duke was not giving her time to catch her breath. The girl began to say that last time she had actually gotten lost in the garden and accidentally interrupted Dante's precious rest time, so she was trying to find a way to repay him. While walking through the streets of Argeo, the heroine noticed something suspicious. She heard someone talking about the Duke, so she decided to eavesdrop on them. From what she heard, Rowlena was so discouraged that she almost forgot how to breathe. During the whole story, the girl tried to look innocent and pitiful. The heroine began to say that although she realized it was rude to come to the Duke, she still remembered what one of those suspicious men looked like. Rowlena didn't know how seriously Dante would take such a statement, but he had no reason to doubt the information he received from the defenseless lady. It was enough if the Duke just knew that he was going to be killed. The girl began to reassure herself that Dante wouldn't die, and it wouldn't all be in vain. She hoped that now the Duke would pay more attention to his surroundings and be more careful. After looking through the papers that Rowlena gave, the Duke began to doubt the girl's words. If to believe the words of the heroine, everything happened very quickly, but she was able to remember all the details and something even managed to sketch. The girl began to justify herself, saying that she had a great memory, but the man still did not trust her, just like the time the heroine had come to the garden, even though he was not available to her. The same thing was happening now with the information the girl had brought to him. These were situations that a young noble lady like Rowlena should not be put into. Dante was very grateful to the girl for her decision to act despite the risks, but he still needed to check the reliability of the information, so the man asked for a favour. The heroine was not sure that she could meet the Duke's expectations, but he insisted. The Duke began to say that he was worried for the girl's safety, as she had encountered some very dangerous people. All Rowlena had to do was simply stay in the man's office for the rest of the banquet. The man was very grateful that the girl had come to him, so he wished that he had been given a chance to repay the favour. At that moment, Rowlena realised that this request was more of a detention. The man left, and the heroine stayed in his office, trying to get out of there. The maids of the manor were reluctant to let the girl out, as the Duke had said that her safety came first. The maid began to say that a guard would soon be assigned to heroine. When it came to witness protection, guards were standard procedure. Rowlena might have been uncomfortable, but the maid was more concerned about her situation. The girl was becoming quite angry, for she didn't understand why people would be locked up like this. Before leaving, the butler was worried if everything would be all right, since the heroine belonged to a noble family. The man had said that just because Rowlena was a young aristocrat, she was treated with respect. Dante was already wary enough because of the recent activity. The girl began to accuse the Duke, saying that he had deceived everyone and there was nothing chivalrous about him. Since the heroine was already in the Duke's estate, she was not allowed to tell anyone about her past life. Just one word about it, and the girl would immediately find herself not in a room, but in a dungeon. At that moment, Rowena realized that even if the Duke had started investigating, it had nothing to do with her. A maid named Mary, who was to be heroine's personal maid while she would be staying at the Duke's estate, entered the room. The maid wanted to bring dinner to the room, but the girl decided to go to where Dante always ate. The butler announced that the man might be late today, so Rowena could start eating first. This whole situation was not pleasant, but on the other hand, she managed to find herself a free place to stay before the banquet started. Prices in the capital were incredibly high, and for the local poor aristocrats it was a great burden. The plan to pretend to be an innocent young lady had failed, but if the girl still managed to spend time at the manor as she had originally intended, perhaps she could keep a closer eye on the Duke's safety. Dante was sitting in his office when he decided to call an assistant to see if there was anything suspicious about Rowena's behaviour. She was eating well and being polite to everyone, so he didn't notice anything suspicious, and it seemed to him that the heroine had gotten used to the manor. Earlier, the Duke thought that the girl was hiding something, so he ordered his men to find out everything about Count Diaz. It was necessary to find out if he was involved with anyone. It had been 2 days since Rowena had been locked up at the Duke's house. Last night she had a dream that was a prediction of the future. Although the heroine had already seen the Duke's impending death after visiting the Emperor's palace, but now she began to see this dream more and more often, so it began to seem to her that this day was very close, but she did not know how to save the man at all. Suddenly, Dante appeared behind Rowena's back, wondering what the girl was writing. He did not want to scare heroine and even called out to her, but she was thinking hard and did not hear the Duke. The man told the rumours that heroine adapted very easily, so he was very happy. Dante snatched the piece of paper out of the girl's hands, who began to assure him that it was only a couple of sketches and that it was rude to take the lady's things without permission. The man did not scandalise and calmly gave the paper to heroine. The girl was very glad that the Duke did not notice anything. Rowena had a new habit after she started seeing the future. She tried to write down her dreams on paper until her memories of them were gone. The girl used an ancient language she remembered from her past life to write down the dreams so that no one could read them but her. Dante began to say that he had made a big mistake, and as an apology for his rudeness, he simply had to grant the girl one wish. The man swore on his honour that he would at least listen to absolutely any wish that Rowena made. The man stood on the edge of the rooftop of the city, relishing the thought that the capital would soon be destroyed. In the imperial palace, the young man did not stop calling the Duke by name. Dante paused, saying that he shouldn't be the next Marquis of Alexia to behave in such a defiant manner. Ashton was unwilling to tolerate such an attitude, for he wanted very much to meet his old friend. The Duke asked not to be disturbed, as he still had business to attend to in the wing of the castle where the rooms of the imperial family were located. The young man reminded him that a man should not make hasty decisions, for the nobility was watching him closely, and meeting the princess alone could raise many questions. At the reception of Princess Titania, Dante decided to find out if there was another way out of the castle. The girl confirmed that there was a secret entrance that only members of the imperial family knew about. The first emperor built secret passageways throughout the palace using the power of demons. The doors of these passages could only be opened with a special key, but they had long since been forgotten because the key had been lost. From the answer he received, the Duke had even more questions. He began to think that Rowena had appeared at the reception out of nowhere, so most likely she had used the passage the princess had mentioned. Eoshit's holy sword had reacted to the girl, and then she had deliberately lied to the Duke and told him about the death threat. Dante knew for certain that the heroine was no ordinary noblewoman. Rowena was sitting in her room, enjoying the tea that her favourite maid had prepared. The girl was greatly disturbed, as she was not at all aware of what had happened to the heroine. The noblewoman briefly recounted how she had come across the Duke, and the Duke had invited her to his house. She remembered how Dante had promised to listen to her every wish. Rowena briefly wished for her maid Betty to be called to the Duke's estate. The man wanted to find out what the heroine's motive was, but she just wanted to save his life. Other than that, she only wishes to be thrown out of the estate as soon as possible, but before that, she had to get close to Dante to make him believe her story. A little while later, the Duke showed up to meet Rowlena, as the butler had told him that the girl wished to speak to him. The heroine began to remind him that the man had told her not to leave the place in question, and because of that, her whole schedule of things had broken down, so she needed to leave the estate to get ready. Dante didn't understand what the girl needed to prepare for. Rowlena told him that she had come to the capital for an upcoming ball in honor of the victory in the war. This ball needed to be thoroughly prepared for. It was not a simple couple of little things that she could do alone. The heroine understood the Duke's sincere desire to protect her, but she couldn't go to the palace unprepared. Rowlena was sure that the man would try to put his men on her, but she wondered what the Duke would do if she wished to go with him. The girl planned to befriend the Duke and prepare for the banquet at the same time. Dante thought it was a great idea, but he wasn't sure if heroine would be all right. Going out with the Duke was going to be very different from Rowlena's expectations, but he was only glad if she got over it. The girl didn't think the man would decide to accompany her so quickly, and he just took it in stride. On the way to the palace, the Duke noticed the girl's worried look. He wondered what she wished to ask him. The heroine began to justify herself, saying that she was a little excited to see the hero of the empire up close. Only when Dante's carriage couldn't move because of the crowd, the girl realized what the man had warned her about. The Duke thought that after a while it would become calmer, but people still did not subside. The girl realized that the man had encountered something like this before, because he had just returned from the battlefield, so he attracted a lot of attention. Dante asked not to worry, saying that soon the knights would disperse the crowd of townspeople. Rowlena thought that there was nothing that could be done about all of this, since Dante was a hero to everyone in the empire. The servant reported that the way was clear, after which the Duke extended his hand to the girl, saying that he would escort her to the place. The heroine wondered why they had taken a different road. Dante was not familiar with the neighbourhood, but from what the butler had told him, they had to look for a tailor in Devisjori. The heroine immediately remembered that the main customers of this establishment were high-ranking aristocrats. The banquet should last for several days, so they had to think it over carefully. Rowlena was still a little surprised, as she hadn't expected the Duke to keep her company. Though it was not like Dante, but it was still difficult for him to understand the girl's goals only from the reports of others. The man decided to observe the heroine on his own and find out everything. The girl had just noticed Madame Sarah's store, which she had been looking for a long time, when suddenly the Duke threw back his umbrella and asked her to stay close to him, as a crowd of people was approaching. The aristocrats were on the outskirts of the capital, so there were far fewer guards in the area. People rushed toward the man in droves, shouting that the opportunity to meet the Duke was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Rowlena laughed at Dante's behaviour, while he did not understand what had come over the girl. The man wanted to leave, but heroine did not want to walk with him like that. The heroine hurriedly took off her cloak and covered the Duke's body with it. If the Duke continued to walk around like this, then only children would hover around him, and adults would not pay any attention. Everyone wanted to at least look at the man, so such temporary measures were necessary. At this time, the entire aristocracy of the imperial palace was furious, because Dante was alone with the princess. They believed that the man had deceived them by telling them that he had decided to take the side of neutrality. The future of the prince, to whom they had sworn allegiance, was supposed to provide a carefree life. The aristocracy could not allow this chance to be taken away from them so easily. The man in charge saw only one remaining option for what could be done with the Duke. They had to deal with him personally before Dante would officially announce his position. One of the listeners became doubtful, for their opponent was too powerful, and they could not even move quietly around the palace without the prince's escort. The man asked not to worry, for he knew people who could take care of the Duke without leaving a single trace. Sir Ruherden was curious as to how the man planned to help carry out the plan. The aristocrat asked him to just watch and not to rush him, so that soon the empire would be swallowed by chaos. On the way to the store, the Duke still had no way of understanding why the girl was looking at him like that. Rowlena said that the cloak on the man was not helping him, as all the workers were sneaking glances at him. Dante decided to stop fooling around, while Heroine thought it was better to call another night. The girl ordered only one dress, and she has a lot more to buy. The Duke asked how many more clothes the Heroine planned to buy. Rowlena estimated that the carnival would last 7 days, so she would need at least a few more outfits. Tailors come to the homes of the high-ranking nobles themselves, and the girl had to do everything herself. Dante noticed that she said all those words without any hesitation, and for a noblewoman she was too obedient. The Duke wondered why Rowlena hadn't brought a maid with her, but she didn't want to disturb Betty, since the maid didn't know the man personally. The Duke suggested treating the girl as a guest, to summon a tailor to his estate. In that case, everyone was supposed to be more comfortable. The Heroine refused to call a tailor as it was too expensive. Besides, they used too expensive and precious stones. With all this, the dress would have to be very expensive. It was just as obvious that the tailors would try to get as much money as possible. Dante didn't understand why Rowlena was so worried about it. The girl realized it and asked him to ignore it because she had said too much. The Heroine argued that everything was fine and there was no need to call a tailor. The man noticed that Rowlena's way of thinking gave away that she was not an aristocrat. The Duke began to recall how the girl had just bargained with the salesman. She had not only ignored the price, as nobles usually do, but had also pestered the poor seller so much that he was ready to cry. Rowlena was well aware of how much the goods should cost, and the owner just jacked up the prices 3 times over. Suddenly the Duke pulled the girl against him, and around them were drunken men ordering them to get out of the way. The man began to explain that, as he had said earlier, this street was hardly patrolled at all. The place was full of bums just looking for trouble. Already during the day, the situation in the area was not pleasant, so it was necessary to send soldiers there on patrols. The Heroine was uncomfortable with what had happened. Compared to other men, the Duke was much more handsome, so it was dangerous. The nobles reached home without any problems, but Rowlena was quite tired on the road. The girl kept wondering if there were any problems to stay with the Duke in the same estate. She had dreamed that the man's death would happen in the winter, so she still had plenty of time. Suddenly, the Heroine's heart was beating faster, and her anxiety was growing. She could feel the future coming closer and closer, and that made her heart uneasy. Heroine had another dream, after which she went straight to the Duke. Dante was thinking about tomorrow's schedule when he suddenly noticed the girl. The man immediately realized that something was wrong, because Rowlena looked quite happy during the day. The Heroine began to say that she saw something terrible, and Dante was not allowed to go to that estate. The girl again had a very violent dream, in which the Duke was killed in the middle of the mansion. The Duke began to soothe the girl, wanting to know what was wrong with her. Rowlena excused herself and wished the man would ignore her, because she had had a nightmare, so she had lost her temper. The girl began to apologize for the fact that Dante had to see her in such a shameful state. The Heroine was very uncomfortable, but still she asked the Duke not to leave the estate in the next few days. The Duke made tea and decided to ask Rowlena what was wrong. The man sat down at the table and began to wonder what the girl meant when she asked him not to leave the manor, thinking. The girl hesitated at first, but then cheered up and said that Dante had only recently returned from the battlefield, so it would be better for him if he took a little more time to rest. The Duke had had enough rest, and with Heroine's request, he might have more to do. It was already late, so the Duke asked Rowlena to go back to her room. The only reason the girl panicked was because this reality was different from her dreams, as the Duke should have been dead by now. As long as the Heroine stayed in the manor, the Duke should have died tragically. This time the Duke could die from poisoning, so the girl needed to save him, as she originally planned. The next morning, the Heroine personally went out to ask where the man was going. The girl began to say that she had behaved inappropriately last night, so she should have thanked him. Dante didn't think so either, saying that Rowlena shouldn't worry about it. The Count's daughter had to thank the Duke anyway, wishing him to be more careful. The girl insisted that the guards stay close to the man at all times and not go anywhere. Rowlena was very worried about Dante, so he needed to be more careful about his safety. The servant girls were amused to see the Heroine asking the strongest warrior in the Empire to take care of her safety. After seeing all this, The butler made it clear that this was not the way to do it. Even though it seemed like Rowlena was worrying too much, it was really all she could do. The Duke stopped and said that Heroine was indeed a strange girl, but she shouldn't have worried about him and instead taken care of herself. Dante's eyes were as cold as when they had first met. The girl began to think that with this behaviour, the Duke was showing that he wanted to draw a line between them. In the carriage, the man's counsellor did not understand what was wrong with the heroine. It was the first time he had ever heard anyone ask the Duke to take care of himself. The man didn't want to answer anything to that, so he ordered his schedule for the day to be told. The young man knew that the Duke kept Rowlena at his estate, and because of that, he assumed there was something between them. Dante thought that his subordinate's tongue continued to talk nonsense, and he could relieve him of such a burden. The young man began to think that Rowlena was abnormal, as she could be worried about such a frowning man. The Duke couldn't stand it and drew his sword, saying that those were the last words of the aide. The heroine was a noble lady who was trying to keep her clan from collapsing. The investigation showed nothing out of the ordinary. Living in the Duke's lineage, the man had seen many cruel things. Dante's intuition told him that Rowlena had contacted him with no intention of harm, but she was still hiding her true motives, so he shouldn't get close to her. Despite the Duke's indifference, Heroine continued to remind him of his own safety. One day, an aide reported that Rowlena was going into town and wanted the Duke to keep her company. The man asked him to tell her that she didn't want to, as he was going to attend Father Wilton's event. Father Wilton also observed neutrality, so the meeting with the Duke could be the true reason for the reception. Soon, the Duke found himself at Wilton's estate, where he was immediately hotly debated. At the entrance, the man introduced Dante to his two daughters, Myrina and Susan. It was a great honour for the girls to meet the hero of the Empire. On the way to the office, Wilton's daughters kept asking about the man's exploits, which made the Duke very annoyed. He wanted to think of an excuse to leave as soon as possible. Susan was overexcited and felt very bad, so her sister was about to ask the man to come back next time. But Wilton asked her not to do that, but just to pass the time in the waiting room. Dante decided to wait for Father while he went about his business. It was all taking too long, so the Duke needed to leave when he had the chance. Suddenly, the man remembered that Rowlena had told him that he shouldn't go anywhere alone and had to have guards with him at all times. The Duke was greatly surprised that he remembered those words so suddenly. At the same time, someone snapped their fingers and black smoke billowed across the waiting room. Dante knew immediately that he was poisoned, but such an amount of poison should not have worked on the wielder of Eoshit's holy sword. As soon as the man thought about it, blood spurted from his mouth. Ruhadin appeared in the middle of the room, saying that it was impossible to resist his poison with such holy power. It went much easier than the man thought it would. After a while, the entire servants of the manor rose to their feet. No one knew what had happened. The doctor had already examined Dante's body and said there was nothing that could be done to help him. Rowlena came running in at the commotion and began to say that there was still a way to save the Duke. Even though the doctor said there was nothing that could be done to help the man, she could save him if she was allowed to examine him. Stefan didn't believe the girl's words, asking who she was after all. The aide asked the young man to wait with his conclusions, as the heroine said she could save the Duke. Rowlena took responsibility for her words and was immediately let through. Stefan was furious, but the young man said that even though he was just an assistant, Dante was allowing him to act at his discretion. In a situation like this, they had to use any means necessary, but Stefan was getting in their way, so he had to back off. The aide asked not to worry as he had pledged to keep a close eye on them. No one else saw it, but there was a huge black snake inside the Duke's body that was about to devour the Duke. If Dante had been an ordinary man, he would have died by now, but the holy power within saved him. In the heroine's dream, the snake did not disappear, but devoured the Duke. From the first day of that dream, Rowlena had been trying to find the answer. She was from the Temple of Nevan, from which the god of darkness had disappeared hundreds of years ago. As a high priestess of Nevan in her past life, the girl had often dealt with spirits from the depths of the realm of darkness. Among them was the serpent that consumed the lives of others, which Rowlena had killed. This same serpent was the poison that killed the Duke. Although the heroine did not have the same powers as before, but she could still communicate with other spirits. The girl stood up, and the huge form of a black serpent appeared in front of her. The heroine began to say that she wished to communicate with the serpent, not with the Duke. In any case, the man's holy power should not have allowed the serpent to devour him. Besides, the girl could offer something tastier in return. The serpent was surprised that she was seeing him and seemed quite familiar. Roland introduced herself, saying that if the man didn't mind, she could give him anything he wanted. The helper was greatly surprised that the girl was just talking to the void. The serpent liked the heroine's power, so he chose her and settled in. The young man wondered what had just happened. The heroine asked not to worry, as she eliminated the threat, after which she felt bad and lost consciousness. At this point, the girl began to dream, in which Rukerden said that no one else will stop him, and soon everything will be over. The girl woke up and saw Duke's surprised face, as she had been unconscious for 2 days. The man reported that the doctor had not noticed any abnormalities in heroine, so she was able to walk safely. Roland was happy that her hunch was correct after all. This black snake was one of the varieties of dark spirits that inhabit people. They absorb their life force, and eventually the person dies. The girl assumed that it was a similar spirit and was not miscalculated, but she still did not know who could control the spirits in these times. After making sure that the heroine was all right, the Duke pounced on her, wanting answers to all his questions. He was especially interested in the girl's true intentions. Even the man's holy powers couldn't stop this poison, but Roland handled it so easily. The man ordered to tell everything the girl was hiding from him. Only heroine began to speak as Stefan ran into the room, saying that a rumour had spread throughout the city that Duke Benerit was hiding his duchess in the manor. That same day, Aston complained to Dante's manor. He was offended that he hadn't seen the duchess in person and wished the man would introduce her to him. The Duke didn't understand how his aide had dared to let such a ragamuffin into the house. Dante said that if the young man was going to keep talking nonsense, he'd better go home. Aston began to recount the rumours of a man who had rejected every marriage proposal, whom everyone thought would live alone for the rest of his life. But it turned out that he already had a lady of the heart. The Duke assured that it was all groundless rumours, and it was pathetic to believe a yellow newspaper. Roland ran out to the men, saying that she had to leave the manor before things went too far. Seeing Aston, the girl became very uncomfortable. The Duke was already beginning to wait for the young man to start teasing him. Aston had not expected to meet the girl in this way, but still he was very glad. Dante shushed the girl, believing she had no need to introduce herself to the young man, since he was an intruder. The Duke ordered the aide to take heroine to her room immediately, though she had something to say to the Duke. The man stood there not understanding why Aston was still here. Dante pointed the young man to the exit, before he personally ordered him thrown out. Roland had helped the Duke wholeheartedly, but he had only become even more suspicious of her. Now the girl wanted to explain herself, but lately she couldn't even see the man. It was only now that she could finally meet, but in the end, she didn't even have time to say a word. Date hadn't even bothered to explain to her what the rumours were going around town, or what he even wanted. In this position, there was no way for the girl to know what was going on outside the manor. Suddenly, behind the girl's back, in the middle of the window, was Aston, who asked to be called Asher. Rowlena wondered how the young man knew where she was, but he excused himself by saying that he was an old friend of the Duke's, so he knew every corner of the estate. The heroine did not know Escher's intentions, but it was wrong to enter her room through the window, so the young man should have left before she called the guards. The young man couldn't leave because he had to present the girl with a personal invitation sent by the Princess of the Empire. In 3 days' time, there was to be a tea party in the capital, and Her Highness wished Lady Roland to attend as well. Escher wondered if the girl would come, as it was an incredibly honourable invitation that every lady of the Empire dreamed of. Whether it was true or not, the rumours had already spread everywhere. Everyone was about to find out about heroine, which was why she had to go, because she couldn't stay at the manor anymore. 3 days later, rumours spread in the imperial capital that the queen of a neighbouring state was involved. All the noblewomen did not understand how Roland got to the tea party, which was only for nobles. Thanks to Betty and Asher's help, the girl was able to sneak into the palace. She was watched by a lot of people, and thanks to the speed of spreading rumours, she did not even have a chance to explain everything, and it was from that day she did not talk to the Duke. The heroine thought that first she needed to find out where all these rumours had started in the first place. In that case, she was forced to establish relations with the nobles who were present at the reception. Suddenly, a girl came up to Rowena and said that she must be in the wrong place because she could not see heroine as the daughter of a noble family. Especially, not even every aristocrat had a chance to attend this tea party, as this event was only for the most powerful members of the empire. The girl wanted Rowena to leave them, as she was not considered her equal. Suddenly the princess said that it was Lady Sylvester who was away, and she personally invited heroine to the reception. Rowena Diaz introduced herself, after which everyone could not remember what kind of family it was. The girl did not understand how it was possible, and why the princess suddenly invited a maiden from an unknown family. Lady Sylvester began to apologise, saying that if this was the first time heroine had attended the princess's tea party, she must have brought some sort of gift in honour of the custom, an incredibly valuable gift that represented the family spirit of the royal family. Everyone wondered what the girl had prepared. Rowena was from an unknown village noble, and of course she wouldn't be able to bring something that would impress the princess, who already had the rarest things from all over the world. It didn't matter what the gift would be, for it would only humiliate the girl. The princess asked Lady Sylvester not to complicate things, for she had invited the heroine rather abruptly. Rowena rejected His Highness's courtesy, for she had heard of the tradition, and prepared a small offering for the princess. At this time, Rucherdon was watching the Duke. He was surprised that the man was still alive, thinking that he wasn't the one who couldn't kill him because he wielded the holy sword. One of the noble's henchmen informed the man that there was an order from above to temporarily not touch the Duke. Rucherdon took the henchman by the head, saying that they had no one higher and stronger than him. Toth was not to be mistaken, for he was just working with them to dispel boredom. The man clenched his hand into a fist, and the minion turned to darkness. The Nevan leader was very unhappy with this action, believing that Rucherdon should not have killed his subordinate. The princess didn't think that Rowena would prepare something, so she was even curious. The girl decided to give a sword as a gift, since she had heard that Her Highness excelled in martial arts. The entire aristocracy began to say that it was a completely insignificant gift. The future empress couldn't enjoy the gift because of the noise, so she ordered everyone to be quiet. She wondered what the gifted sword would be like in practice. The princess still did not react to Rowena's disparaging remarks. She deliberately called out to the man who was the reason for the many rumours surrounding the Duke. Suddenly the sword began to glow, and then the girl explained that it was an ancient blade made of mithril, which everyone called the metal of the gods. No matter what the princess cuts with it, it will never dull or break, plus it will shine brightly forever. Not too long ago, this sword was found in the ruins in the Holy Lands of the Duchy of Benerit. Rowena chose this sword because it was perfect for the emperor, but she didn't know if the princess would like it. Lady Sylvester began to argue that the girl could not have known for certain that the sword was an ancient treasure. She did not understand how the heroine could present the princess with something that had not passed the authenticity test. With a cold face, Her Highness began to ask the girl what her eyes were for. The main reason why mithril was called the metal of the gods was that the mineral itself gave off a glow, so the princess could tell with the naked eye that it was mithril. Rowena understood that it was hard for ordinary people to believe in such a thing, because most likely Lady Sylvester had seen mithril for the first time. Barring the Emperor's treasure trove, this was the first time the princess had seen such a thing so close. She never thought she would receive such a valuable gift. The heroine exhaled, thinking that Asher was right when he said she liked swordsmanship. The aristocrats immediately began to marvel at the girl's marvellous gift. It was indeed marvellous, all because Roland had tried to help her family get out of debt. She tried to find any memories of her past life, and the sword was the result of the sweat and blood she had shed while exploring the ruins of an ancient temple. Lady Sylvester couldn't ask the girl for something that humiliated her greatly. At the end of the day, the girl decided to sit alone, as she had to smile all day long. The most important thing for her was to keep those ladies from the palace quiet about the rumors. Perhaps the only one who was aware of everything was only the princess. Suddenly, Lady Sylvester paid a visit to Heroine to inform her that the princess had asked Rowena to report to her immediately, so she had to hurry. The girl only wanted to correct her dress as tea spilled over her. The girl began to say that she did it by accident, and Heroine shouldn't have kept the princess waiting. Rowena realized that it was done on purpose. She couldn't say anything about this ridiculous situation, for she shouldn't have lost her temper in the capital even for a second. Everyone was just gossiping in this sacrilegious imperial citadel. Suddenly the Duke appeared, who had already searched everywhere for the girl. Seeing Dante, the heroine asked if he would give her a chance to prove that she would always be at his side. There were moments when Rowena felt angry, but as soon as she saw the tall silhouette of the Duke while she was being insulted, she just wanted to be near him so that everyone else would be jealous. It was all very much like a childish anger. The aristocracy didn't understand what Dante was doing at the reception. It was the first time they had ever seen the Duke speak to a woman in such a manner. The princess began to say that Lady Diaz was the cause of all the rumours, and if it wasn't true, the Duke wouldn't show up in person. It did not matter to the man whether the girl wished to prove anything or not, for neither the place nor the time was very suitable for such a conversation. Dante wished to return to the hacienda for starters. Rowena began to worry about the tea party, but the man insisted, saying that the princess would let them leave the palace in peace. The princess agreed with Dante, expecting to hear the stories continue next time. At the entrance to the manor, the butler greeted the girl, telling her that she had no idea how worried they were when they couldn't find her at the manor. The young man asked her to let him know next time if she wished to go out. As long as Roland stayed at the Duke's estate, the butler had to know about everything she wanted to do or where she wanted to go. The Duke ordered Yong Kim to stop speaking, asking the girl to come into his office to talk properly. In the study, Dante began to question what the words about proof meant. Though the man tried to understand, the heroine's true message was very hard to grasp. Rohalina was still surprised that the Duke had come to the tea party. It had been a risky move. Dante was a shining knight and wielder of the holy sword. The girl didn't know if she could tell the Duke everything. At least, she was sure that a distinguished man like Dante van Benerit would hear it. The heroine began to recall how not so long ago she had warned the Duke that some suspicious people wanted to harm him. After all this, his life was indeed in danger. Rowena told her that the man's poisoning was connected to these suspicious people. She wondered if Dante had ever wondered how she knew all this. The Duke suggested that it was the holy power that had saved him from the poison, so the girl might have been connected to the holy temple. The man almost guessed, but it wasn't quite true, for in fact the heroine could see what would happen in the near future. She knew that the Duke would be poisoned, and she was trying to prevent it. Dante was greatly surprised, but he couldn't understand how he could believe such nonsense. It was obvious that it sounded implausible, so the girl said she would prove it to the Duke. Looking into Rowalina's eyes, the man realized that she was not lying, but he still had to be sure. The Duke asked if the girl was really sure she wanted to tell him her secret. If such an unusual ability becomes known, Roland will find herself in the Holy Temple, in a place with strict laws and discipline, which will be very difficult for the girl. The heroine was sure that the man would not tell anyone, although he continued to suspect her, but she was determined that she would stay and protect him. Dante really wanted to know what reason Roland had for helping him. The man did not think that the girl had been so kind to him without demanding anything in return. The heroine asked the Duke not to worry, since she had already received her reward. She didn't want to tell him that she enjoyed the free food and clothes. The girl gathered herself, and they travelled with the Duke to the place where she was to prove her words. Dante wanted to know where they were going, but Rowena asked to just follow her. They had to put on masks at the entrance, and then they went to the underground auction. The Duke still didn't believe that it was an auction house, since the entrance looked like a normal building. The man thought that Rolina often came to this place, since she even took care of the entrance ticket in advance. In fact, the girl had just asked the butler, and he had already prepared everything quickly. The heroine had only heard about this place from third parties and was visiting now, so she decided to find out everything beforehand. Roland had been here in her past life, but this was the first time in her current one, so she wasn't lying. For convenience, the girl asked to be called by her first name. The man took heroine's hand and thanked her for doing so much to save him. The embarrassed girl decided not to hesitate and went straight to the auction. The Duke did not understand what he was doing, for he felt very strange next to Roland. As a child, the Duke was beaten, saying in order to proudly carry the name of the Bennerites, he had to be perfect. According to his parents, if you are not perfect, you will be thrown away. The auction host welcomed all the guests. Today was a special day, as she had never seen something like this anywhere in the world. When Dante sat down, he began to ask their next move. The girl pointed out several Pieros, one of whom was connected to the criminals. She knew him by sight, but nothing could be seen from this far away. Roland believed that if the Duke caught him and questioned him, he would find whoever was behind it all. Dante had asked the Viscount about the red-haired man immediately after the poisoning, but he hadn't said a word. If he'd been able to find even the slightest clue, he wouldn't be at the auction now. They announced a new lot, which turned out to be a young mermaid. The girl couldn't believe her eyes, for this was not just an auction, but a real human trade. It was a direct violation of imperial laws to engage in slave trade so openly. The Duke didn't know if it was a common commodity for this place or not, but it was not acceptable for the Empire. Dante realized that he might miss Piero, but he decided to go and call the guards. Dealing with these immoral people was much more important to him than that man. The Duke left, and at the same time heroine noticed the need for Piero. Roland ran after the girl and found herself near a strange room. In the room, a group of people gathered around the young man. Roussel begged them to let him go because he was an ordinary man. The salesman said that the young man had already been sold to an aristocrat for 3 million gold pieces. If he would just pretend to be a mermaid and sit in this aquarium, he could live a quiet and carefree life. The man convinced the young man that he was still lucky, for those who were not sold were taken to the temple. When the Grand Duke ended the war, the deserted prisoners like the mermaid brought to the auction were transferred to the temple, after which most died. Suddenly, the vendor told of a rumor that a so-called hero had returned from the battlefield with a dash of demon blood. Piero strolled quietly through the Orchidson, and she was sorry that she didn't see anything she wanted today. She had originally planned on getting a couple of new toys. Suddenly, Ruadan wondered why the girl lacked human slaves. Piero had not expected to see so strange a man in such a place. At that time, the sellers said that the Duke was so engrossed in the massacre that at some point he decided to leave the battlefield himself. Roland was horrified by what she had heard, but now she had to tell everyone the truth. There were many children imprisoned here, and instead of looking for Piero, she had to find a way to get out. The girl knew roughly what would happen to the criminal the Duke would catch. Suddenly, goosebumps ran all over the heroine's body, and the dark serpent began to tell her that someone was very close by. Ruherden found himself right in front of Roland. The intense pressure of the man's gaze made the girl want to just run away from there. The man grabbed the Count's daughter by the arm and began to question who he even was. He didn't understand what kind of person you had to be followed by a snake, and yet not be hurt. The girl was shocked that Ruherden was able to grab the snake with ease, for it was impossible for an ordinary person to even see it. The symbol on the man's hand was exactly the same as the killer from Roland's dream. The man didn't stop asking. The heroine agreed to answer only after she knew whether or not Ruherden had sent the snake. The assassin looked into the girl's eyes and realized that they definitely belonged to the servant of the god of darkness. The man started laughing while Roland thought he was just a normal madman. He could be a more important clue to the girl than Pierrot. The heroine realized that she would not get an answer just like that, and had to wait for the garrison, which should arrive soon. The man introduced himself as Lugan, saying that he had been waiting a long time to meet the girl. Roland claimed she was seeing him for the first time, but Lugan said it was useless for Inez to pretend. The name belonged to the girl, but had been forgotten even before she was called Roland. The man asked the heroine to go with him, just as he had then. The girl did not know what she should do, however she absolutely had to get rid of him. As soon as Lugan wanted to get closer to the heroine, the holy sword flew between their heads. Even at the very beginning, the girl became curious. When she was near the Duke, it felt like a ripple rolling across the water in the middle of a calm day. In that brief moment of curiosity, a strange, indescribable feeling was born. Lugan was displeased, for normally no one would throw a sword at a man and then ask if everything was all right, as if nothing had happened. The Duke was not interested in his opinion, for he still remembered that it was this man who had attacked him. The assassin had no time, and he already wanted to take Roland to get out of there, but the Duke blocked her, claiming that he wouldn't let him lay a finger on the girl. The heroine began to assure that the man had confused her, and she was not who he thought she was, although she was Inez, but this name has long been in the past. Lugan could not believe her words, for he would never have confused her with anyone else. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared on the floor, which was supposed to transport them to another place. The man had no regrets, for the girl wouldn't be able to hide anyway, so he would never lose her again. The murderer disappeared, and the Duke began to hand out search instructions. Roland was very worried about the children who were going to be sold, for they were locked up in the warehouse. Dante promised to take care of them, but for now, they needed to step back and have a serious talk. As soon as the Duke entered the room, the girl began to make excuses that she had accidentally seen Pierrot and chased after him. And then, out of nowhere, Lugan appeared, mistaking her for someone else, and began to behave rudely. The Duke silently took Heroine's hand, not stopping to look at her. The man was concerned that Roland's wrist was a little swollen. The Duke hurriedly brought medicine, but still thought he should have seen a doctor. The girl didn't understand what had gotten into Dante. She had expected that he would at least interrogate her as he had last time. Though her wrist was sore, the girl felt quite calm. Roland couldn't understand why the man didn't ask her about what had recently happened, as she thought he would question her. The Duke just wanted to believe Heroine. The girl had said she would prove it to him, and he had seen with his own eyes the true form of those people. So now it was time for Roland to trust him. The heroine was a little scared that a skeptic like Dante decided to believe her. At the manor, the girl asked the butler when the Duke would return. Ji-Yum didn't know the exact time, but he was sure that the man would stay until the night. The incident at the auction had made a lot of noise, so the Duke was swamped with work. Roland wanted to know what had happened to the rescued prisoners. When she told of the bandits cheating everyone out of their face at the auction, Dante's face darkened. Duke knew how it was possible that people were briefly turned into mermaids. A magical artifact was a forbidden demonic device that could do almost anything. Lugan disappeared as soon as the magical Simvom appeared, so it most likely had something to do with demons. One day, an army of demons came against Eeyore, Lord of Light. Eeyore spread the news through the churches that demons were the cause of all misfortune, the ones who had turned the majestic forests of Deluta into a scorched desert. Demons were humanity's greatest enemies, capturing souls and corrupting them. They crossed the lifeless desert, spreading magic everywhere that threatened the integrity of the entire empire. The Army of Light, led by the Benerit family, had protected the country from demons for hundreds of years. Everyone living in the empire knew of this history. If Lugan had something to do with demons, the church would likely do something about it, and then things would get a lot more serious. Those who were tried to be sold could fall under the church's distribution. At this moment, the Duke entered the girl's room after hearing that she was looking for him. The heroine still could not sleep, so Dante asked not to worry, because if the killers appear again, he will not allow them to harm Roland. The Duke originally brought the girl to his estate to protect her. In this conversation, the man was very sensitive, not at all like their first meeting. Roland had a lot to say, but she was worried about the children and the boy who were prisoners being held in the warehouse. Dante promised they'd be okay, and no one would hurt them, and the heroine was in more danger than they were. The Duke had said earlier that if the church found out about the girl's abilities, the situation could get even worse, and Lugan would probably not be far behind the heroine. He was a real threat to Roland's life, so she had to be more careful from now on. as danger could lurk around every corner. The girl understood the situation and promised to behave more carefully. She trusted the Duke, so she wasn't going to worry about it anymore. Dante was right, because if the demons helped the criminals escape, the closer the heroine got to them, the more dangerous her situation would become. The next morning, Jan, who had been her messenger since that day, came to Rolina. The girl immediately recognized him as the boy who had been forced to pretend to be a mermaid. The young man was very happy that he could get out of that hell and also get a chance to work in a rich manner. For a moment, heroine began to think that the Duke had done it on purpose, but in the end, she couldn't believe it. That same day, Dante went to the church to report what had happened at the auction. From the Duke's account, it appeared that demonic forces were involved after all. The criminals had been exposed, so Dante didn't think they would dare to do something like that again. However, the Duke needed the power of the high priest of the church to track them down. The high priest said that the best knights who were at the origins of the empire, called Knights of Light, could not make such mistakes. He couldn't understand how the demons dared to desecrate their holy lands with their presence. Everyone in the church blamed the Duke that the demons had managed to organize a clandestine auction. Everyone wanted to hear any answer, but Eora Libert Armin assured everyone that the man would handle everything. The third servant was more interested in whether the Duke had anything else to share. Dante didn't understand such a question, so Libertus told him that Duke Benerit had finally found a woman he didn't mind living the rest of his life with. The man said it was just an unfounded rumor, but Libert remembered that the girl's name was Roland Diaz. She was of no interest to the church, because she had no connection to demons, so the church had no need to know about the personal affairs of the Duke's family. Libert was sure that it would be wrong to ignore such stunning news, especially when it came to the Duke, who had always refused all marriage proposals, because of which His Majesty simply couldn't help but be interested. The marriage was only the Duke's concern and had nothing to do with demons. The church had begun to keep an eye on Roland, and if they found out that she was different, she would be locked away in the most sacred and distant halls of Eora. The Duke still had no way of understanding how it had come to the point that a Knight of Light like him had such thoughts. Dante ordered Stefan to cancel all plans, as he had better things to do, since he couldn't put heroine in danger because of his position. After what happened at the auction, all leads were as vague as the dreams themselves. The letters the girl had found were completely useless. It was a week before the feast. Rowelina had originally planned to stay at the manor until the end, but now she was running out of time. At first she thought it would be enough to inform the Duke of the danger, because she was a hero and the strongest knight in the empire, but a restless feeling kept her on her toes. The heroine decided that she needed to gather as much information as possible. She didn't expect the Duke to send a dozen guards with her, and she wondered why Ian had joined the army. Rolina entered the bookstore and saw the salesman on the floor. The man wanted to offer a book, but the girl came to his store to seek a favour from Mr. Hawke, the Empire's best informant. The heroine brought with her a letter of recommendation, so the salesman did not need to pretend to be a clumsy simpleton. Roland had also brought enough money with her to pay for the information. If the man would do what the girl needed, she was ready to pay any price Mr. Hawke offered. The heroine introduced herself as Rolina Diaz. That should have been enough to figure out who she was. The informant had to know about the gift for the princess from Lady Diaz. The girl was going to pay as much as she wanted if Hawke found the thing she needed within the allotted time. The heroine needed a book about the history of ancient myths, written in a long-forgotten language called Dusky Darkness. The seller was a bit surprised by the offer, as such an ancient book hardly existed until now. The girl didn't need the original, and a copy would be enough for her. The man didn't understand why she needed ancient writings that she couldn't even read. Roland did not reply to this, but only gave 3 days for the book to be found. The girl believed that if you couldn't find the information you needed in dreams, you had to look for it in other sources. She thought that by using knowledge from the past, she would definitely be able to get a hold of something. In the middle of the street, a red-haired boy appeared in front of the heroine. As soon as Ian saw the boy, he was immediately curious to know who he was, but he assured him that he didn't need to know. The young man thought that everything was not going the way he had planned. Not long ago, Lugan decided to go for a walk. Piero discouraged him, because there was a bounty on his head. The man had to change his appearance to that of a boy and went to the meeting. To make the girl finally pay attention to him, Lugan began to call her by the name Inez. The guards began to say that it was time for them to go back. The criminal agreed with this opinion, wanting to go with them. The girl wondered what Lugan wished of her, so she said that he was a distant relative of hers, and so he simply had to come along with them. At first, Rolina was taken aback, but this was her chance. The man might turn out to be a better lead than an old book. Luckily, the criminal wasn't hostile, so she would at least try to get some information out of him, but she had to start by asking why the man was chasing her. Lugan revealed that he just wanted to meet up to renew their old relationship. The man said that the heroine's vessel was different, but her soul was still the same, and even if she tried to hide or run away, he would be sure to find her. Rolina asked if Lugan had been reborn with past memories from the distant past, and then met her. The perpetrator explained that his body could not have been human. Having existed on Earth long enough, things could get boring. In the past, Inez was the only person who could talk to him, and the only one who, for the first time on Earth, made him forget about boredom. Lugan realized that the girl did not remember much of her past life. Roland didn't understand why the man had attacked the Duke if his purpose was to meet her. The man revealed that he was just curious as to why the heroine was helping Duke Benerit specifically. The criminal jumped up and leaned his forehead against the girl. Rolina was very frightened, but Lugan only wanted to return the dark serpent to her. Of course it was wrong to give away a gift addressed to the Duke, but he had no choice. The man could not stop the heroine, nor could he be reckless about such things, for unlike in her previous life, it was not as if the girl had all her powers. Rolina wasn't going to tell Lugan anything, and besides, he hadn't answered her questions yet. The criminal decided to offer a more original option to solve their disagreement. When the girl appeared at the manor, she was greatly surprised that the Duke returned so quickly. The heroine began to say that she accidentally met her distant relative. The young man confirmed, saying that he was a very distant and very special relative. After these words, the girl began to apologize profusely, for Lugan was very ill-mannered. According to Rolina, the boy had been in the capital for a long time, so he had to leave soon. The Duke did not mind the boy's presence, but even small children had to be taught good manners. In the carriage, Lugan offered to make sure that everyone got what they wanted. The heroine didn't want to believe him, but the man knew far more than she could even imagine. He knew about Rolina's past and her abilities, and also about the organization that was targeting the Duke. The man assured that he never reneged on his words, so first the girl should feed him well and show him where the Duke lived. Lugan was very uncomfortable because the heroine was always fidgeting next to Dante, not to be alone with the young man. From the outside, one couldn't tell for sure, but from the inside, it could be seen that a strange light surrounded the entire manor. The perpetrator was planning to do something to make the girl remember the old hymn. The atmosphere at the table was oppressive. Rolina thought she could extract new information from the man and quickly send him away. But for some reason today, the Duke returned too early. Even the strongest knight in the Empire didn't understand anything at dinner, so Lugan had to be led away from Dante as soon as possible. The heroine said that as soon as the young man had eaten dinner, he would leave immediately, and he should not have prepared the room. The criminal still wondered why the Duke lived in the same house with Rolina. The girl said that she was invited as a guest, so she decided to take advantage of the Duke's hospitality and stayed at his estate until the ball. Lugan kept asking about their relationship, as they were worried about each other. The heroine couldn't answer right away, which meant that there was something between them. Rolina couldn't say that it was all to prevent the Duke's death, and that there was nothing between them at all. The young man had asked this so suddenly that she didn't even know how to answer it. Dante stood up and spoke about the rumours of his relationship with Lady Roland, saying that she was his lover. Lugan was furious at such a statement, and the girl immediately realised that the Duke was up to something. They had only recently met, so the man refused to believe it all. The look on the young man's face seemed very familiar to heroine, but she couldn't remember where she had seen him. When Dante said that the girl was his lover, Lugan jumped up and ran away, so he pretended that the young man liked her. The man went into the forest where he was already preparing a plan to destroy everything. An unknown voice asked him not to say such a thing, not to cross the line. Lugan agreed with the words, thinking that there was no need to pay attention to the Duke's antics. He didn't understand why the voice was still hiding and trying to protect him. It was all because the young man had broken the seal so that a guard like her could only follow the man. The voice warned Lugan that he should not meddle in the affairs of men, as he was not to forget the sins of the past. That same day, many letters came to Rolena's name. Ever since the day she had attended the tea party, she had been constantly being sent similar invitations. The fact that the Duke and the girl were together at the tea party practically confirmed all the rumours. As expected, even the church showed interest in such a situation. Dante said that next time, if there was something to give Rolena, he should have carried it to her at once and not had to come and report it to him. The butler had been doing well lately, but he still should have tried to be more courteous. The man wondered what the man meant, whether he should treat Lady Roland not as a guest, but as a lady of the heart. The Duke banished the courtier to stop talking nonsense. Now the problem was brewing as to what the heroine was thinking now. Unlike the way the girl looked when she did things that took Dante's breath away, now her face was a little embarrassed. The Duke felt very embarrassed that he was even thinking about such things. Even the church was interested in the girl, so he had to prepare himself to retaliate. At this time, Roland was pondering about the rumours that she and the Duke were a couple together. The girl didn't understand what the Duke's purpose was at all, believing that he did it because of Lugan. Suddenly, the butler came to heroine with invitations from aristocrats who wanted to meet Roland. The young man asked to contact him if the girl wished to go somewhere, and he would immediately triple everything. The reception was about to take place, so the heroine declined the offer. The butler insisted that the girl could visit them after the reception, but she had originally planned to stay at the manor until the reception. The heroine began to say that the young man was already a very busy man, so she didn't want to give him any extra trouble. From the very first day of Rolena's stay, Ji-Yum had taken care of her and never showed his displeasure. The butler was worried about the girl. Since she was the Duke's lover, her social activity was especially important in the near future. The heroine began to assure that she could not be Dante's beloved, although given the number of invitations, the elite of society already knew everything. Roland suspected it, but that tea party only reinforced the rumours. Although the girl did not dare to reject the princess's proposal, but after the reception, everyone had a clear understanding that she was the lover of the Empire's hero. It could have been too late, but the girl had to deny it. In the absence of her father, the heroine could not get into more debts and defame the honour of the family. Of course, it was necessary to find all the information about the criminals, but she needed to prepare for the upcoming reception. In the evening, Roland had too much on her mind again, which made her unable to sleep. Suddenly the Duke came up and began to say that it was supposed to be cool this night, and in such light clothes the girl could get sick. The heroine advised the man to shift some of his affairs to his subordinates, so that he would have more time to rest. The girl began to remember Dante's question about whether Roland hated the very idea that they could be a couple. The heroine was very surprised, but found no reason to hate it, so she thought that they really should try to become lovers. Things became more interesting in society, and the unknown man could not wait to meet the Duke again. People from the trading company came to Dante's manor. The maid wanted to tell them to come another day, but heroine insisted on the reception. During the conversation, the bookseller introduced himself as Los. Roland got straight to the point, asking if they had found what they were looking for. The man began to say that the lady had no idea how much effort and time it had taken him, and he even had to give up sleep. Los resented that Roland had given him such a tight deadline and asked him to find the thing and deliver it to her. The heroine realised that the man just wanted to talk. He looked silly, but the merchant seemed to be trying to get a higher price. A little tricks of the girl and Los immediately got the book. Before the man found the book, he had learned that there was no one capable of translating such an ancient text, so he wondered why the lady needed it. Roland told him that in fact, she just wanted to test Hawke's abilities, and find out how true the rumours were. As expected from the Empire's best network of informants, they satisfied the girl's curiosity. Half of these words were true and half were lies. The heroine could translate this ancient scripture, but there was no reason for Lost to know about it. With the help of the book, the girl was going to clarify her blurred memories. The book spoke of the symbol of Paris, the sign of the eternal oath between master and servant. The symbol was imprinted on the soul like a lifetime contract. From all of this, it followed that the name of the organisation that targeted the Duke had the name Nevan. The girl was thinking over all the information she had received in the garden, as she suddenly noticed the Duke, whereupon she went around the corner of the house, for she felt very awkward after that night's conversation, when she had proposed to the man that they should become true lovers. The Duke approached Rowlena, asking what she was doing here. He immediately realised that the girl had hidden as soon as she saw him. Dante suggested a short walk through the garden, and the heroine agreed, thinking that she didn't have to show the Duke her confused look. The man asked if the girl was really okay with them being a real couple. Rowlena didn't deny anything, which made the Duke very happy that their views had converged, since everyone already thought that they were a couple. Dante didn't care about their relationship, but since heroine had already entered the high society, she had to play along with the rumours. Even if she realises it, but still, the Duke's position in society has always drawn a lot of attention. There were plenty of other reasons to try to gain his trust at the ball besides the murder, and the church had taken notice of Rowlena. The man thought this was his miscalculation, as he should have foreseen this, so he wanted to be the heroine's date right at the ball. The Duke thought that until everything subsided, they would have to be a couple, just like in the rumours. Previously, the girl never thought that she would play the lover of a man, the hero of the Empire. Some time passed, and finally the first day of the reception came. A man came to find out what Rowlena was doing, but she was busy. The Duke ordered the butler to tell the tailor to stay a few days at the manor, to help the lady as a last resort. At that moment, the heroine came out in her most gorgeous form. Initially, she wanted to finish as soon as possible, but since she had to officially accompany the man at the reception, she had to look stunning. Dante appreciated the girl's beauty, which made her uncomfortable. The Duke approached the girl and asked her how he looked and if he was suitable to be her lover. The distance made Rowlena's whole face blush. She had to pull herself together, for if they were going to play lovers, it had to be a habit. The girl began to say that she had agreed to pretend to be a couple while they were in the Emperor's palace, so the man should not have done so. The Duke was the kind of man who, when he started something new, always put all his efforts into it. From now on, Roland was obliged to behave the same way, so that they looked like a couple of lovebirds. As Dante's lover, the girl began to ask about the Duke's past girlfriends. The man had said earlier that she looked beautiful, so it seemed as if he was used to throwing such words around. It was just that the girl was a little curious about her bunny's past. Such an unexpected question made the Duke laugh. The heroine realised that asking such a thing was too much, but she wanted to be worried about their lies, not just her. Dante said that he wasn't a womanizer and hadn't let anyone into his heart yet, because he had sworn a long time ago that he would never marry. Rowlena was curious to know the reasons, but the man tried to avoid the question at all costs. The Duke was a hero of the Empire, a shining knight, master of the Holy Sword and head of the Bennerite family. It seemed that the man had everything and nothing was impossible for him. The Duke said that they had already arrived at the Imperial Palace and that it was already time for them to leave. The man was about to escort Rowlena out, wanting to just hold hands with her. As soon as the heroine stepped out of the carriage, all eyes were immediately fixed on her, despite the fact that the girl still hadn't entered the hall, and she was already under everyone's attention. The Duke recalled that Roland had allowed her to call her by her first name, so he did the same. The girl's main purpose was the Emperor's reception, at which she was to appear as the Duke of Bennerit's sweetheart. The butler announced that the head of the Bennerit family, his lordship Duke van Bennerit, and his companion, the young lady Roland Diaz of the County of Diaz, had arrived. Everyone was very happy to see Dante, but they did not know who he had brought to the reception. The girls quickly surrounded the Duke, which made heroine feel like she was only getting in the man's way. The Duke paid no attention to the crowd and stared intently at the girl. Dante walked up to her and began to ask why she had moved away from him immediately when he was trapped. Everyone was very excited, and Roland didn't want to be surrounded like the Duke was. Now for people, the rumours about the girl and Dante had become the purest truth. The heroine was a little frightened, because as at the tea party, all the ladies present did not behave like ordinary people. At times like this, the girl needed to use the Duke as a shield, so she needed to stay close to him so that fewer eyes would stare at her. After the reception, the couple went into the garden to rest for a while. For Rowlena, socialising with people was more difficult than she had thought. The Duke claimed that this was the first reception she had attended as his lover, so it was not surprising that she was experiencing something similar. The heroine expected that the man often attended such events, but as it turned out, he went only to the most significant ones. Suddenly, Strephon needed something from Dante, and together they were forced to leave Rowlena for a while. The girl was confused, for the more she tried about the Duke, the more she understood him. She hesitated a lot as she tried to get to know the man better. The heroine began to worry that the Duke had not returned to her in a long time. She worried that in all that time she had been busy making preparations for the reception, so she hadn't had time to tell Dante what she had learned. Roland wanted to tell me about the mark of Porus. It was written in an ancient book that it was the mark of a contract that an ordinary man made with a powerful entity. In the past, there was only one living soul capable of making such a contract. If Lugan really had Porus's mark on him, it meant that he was being assisted by a powerful entity, superior to any human. Suddenly, the heroine's thoughts were disturbed by two aristocrats who were wondering why the girl was all alone. Roland made the excuse that she was just out for some fresh air. The girls spoke of their desire to say hello to the one who was rumoured to be the Duke's lover. The blonde introduced herself as Serafina Ayla of the Earl family, and the girl behind her was Lady Liza Pamir of the Baron family. Rowlena just wanted to introduce herself, but Serafina started to say that she would never accept the fact that heroine was the Duke's lover. She didn't like the fact that while she couldn't even go up and say hello to Dante, the girl dared to steal him away. Serafina challenged Rowlena to a duel to see whose love for the Duke was stronger in a fair contest. Escher started to say that it wasn't that simple. He pretended he hadn't heard anything about the duel, so he asked the girls to remove themselves. The man came to see if Lady Diaz was okay. The girl was fine, but only she didn't know what to do since she had agreed to duel. Escher laughed, saying that a long time ago, duels were indeed very popular, because the image of a strong woman was very attractive in those times. Ladies from noble families practiced horseback riding, fencing and other skills, and the winner of the contest would win the heart of the person he was fighting over. Duels had happened quite often in the past, but were banned because of their brutality. The girl was very glad that such a thing had been banned. Among the other aristocrats, Roland noticed the Duke and thought that the man was worth the girl's fighting for his love. Dante noticed the girl along with Asher, causing her to almost fall, but the man managed to help her. The Duke's gaze immediately darkened at what he saw. Duke approached the girl in a rush, telling her that she needed to stay away from Asher. He was the kind of guy who could get anyone into trouble, even just by standing around. The man was furious that his old friend had spoken so poorly of him. The Duke asked the girl if Escher was bothering her, but she was even pleased to hear some of the things he'd said. Dante insisted on staying away from the man, for every aristocrat knew he was a womanizer. Escher argued that the ladies who were attracted to his beauty were themselves attracted to him. For Rowlena, this statement seemed very strange, because if to judge by popularity, the Duke was clearly winning here, because recently all female eyes were fixed on him. Asher wondered if the girl really thought that Dante was more attractive than him from a female point of view. By Rowlena's inference, it appeared that she wished the ladies would pay more attention to the Duke. Asher was saddened by these words, and he began to envy that heroine thought the Duke more attractive than he did. Dante immediately cheered up, saying that it was obvious. Despite the interesting conversation, the couple had to return to the palace because the grandchildren of the imperial family had arrived. The princess, on behalf of the emperor, who was fighting a serious illness, thanked everyone present at today's reception. Titania had a majestic air about her, and next to her was the second heir born to the Empress. It was rumoured that the young man had inherited the same disease as His Majesty, so he rarely appeared in public. The Duke personally greeted Titania and Theodore, after which they began to call them a beautiful couple. The princess said that she was still using the girl's gift, and she really liked it. Theodore asked to introduce the couple to him, which made Roland not understand what was going on, because in this struggle for the imperial throne, a man had to know everything that was going on in the palace. The girl and the prince introduced themselves, and now that Theodore had seen Heroine up close, he could say with certainty that she was indeed beautiful. The man asked the couple to stop by his place sometime, as he wanted to treat them to his new Arican tea. Although Theodore was a prince, he did not inspire any authority at all. It was clear to the princess now, for the Duke had arrived at the palace with the girl. Rumours spread far, and their denial became impossible. The prince rejoiced for the couple, saying that he would pray to the gods for their happiness in the future. The more Dante protected Heroine, the more he showed how much he was in love. From the look on the prince's face, he was hurt by those words, but as long as the performance promised to be spectacular, none of that mattered. Titania told the girl in her ear not to let herself be fooled by the prince's mere appearance. Dante hurriedly led the girl to the centre of the hall, suggesting she have fun dancing. Roland asked the man not to fall into a stupor when he saw how good she was. To say that the heroine felt confident in such an unusual place, and surrounded by equally unusual people, would be a lie. Even if that was the case, the girl still felt great. At this moment, the Nepian envoy was giving orders to Maria to deal with the heroine. The man believed that the Duke wouldn't be able to get rid of him this time. Dante had to just keep the girl safe, and then he would definitely see the consequences. The appearance of the Duke's rumoured lover caused quite a stir in high society. As a result, more and more people began to try to get to know Rowlena better. For the girl, such events were tedious, and at this rate, she could soon become exhausted. At the next table over from Heroine, the aristocrats were discussing that Duke Benerit had been celebrating his victory at various events for 3 days now. All the days in a row, the man had been dancing with that rumoured lover of his, so it looked like they were really going to get married soon. Roland was not happy that spreading rumours had become some kind of addiction. In 3 days, the girl had become a universal object of jealousy, as well as envy. The aristocrats laughed and talked sweetly with the heroine, but at the first opportunity, they began to gossip behind her back. After the girl heard that she supposedly used her body to seduce the Duke, she immediately went to deal with the noblewomen, but she suddenly stopped. The girl said that the Benerite duchy had no more heirs, since the previous Duke and Duchess had died at the same time. In such a situation, Dante had managed to protect his family and become so influential, so it seemed that the man had been through a lot. He had returned safely from the battlefield, so he was probably already thinking about children. Roland had not previously known that Dante was the sole heir of the Benerit family. The girl wondered that in all the time she had lived in the estate, except for the Duke, she had never met any of his kin. The heroine began to think even more why the man said that he would never marry. Most likely, Dante had no intention of continuing the Benerite lineage. In the whole country, no aristocrat would ever give up his lineage, so it seemed that the man wished his family to disappear from the face of the earth. The heroine heard some strange sound, after which she immediately lost consciousness. Stefan reported to the Duke that the priest of their temple said that he had noticed suspicious signs around the imperial palace. Since the first day of the ball, signs of bad luck had been seen for several days now, so it was possible that remnants of demons had infiltrated the empire and were plotting something. Dante promised that he would deal with everything, but suddenly he remembered the girl's words that he was the target of the demons. The Duke was obliged to find and destroy them at any cost. The man ordered Stefan to strengthen the guards around the palace, and if he noticed the slightest oddity, to inform him immediately. Suddenly, Jan came running to the man, shouting that there was trouble with Lady Roland. The girl was in a dream, but it was the first time such a thing had happened to her, for it had happened violently. Among the many branches of the future, she saw the nearest one, in which someone had decided to act. The voice asked for a gift to be given to the man who lurked in the Duke's shadow, to be finished with him for good. The heroine woke up instantly and was surprised that she was not in the reception room of the ball. The worried Duke informed the girl that she had fainted. Dante put his hand on Roland's forehead and asked her to rest some more, as she still had a slight fever. The man wanted to call his sisters, but the heroine grabbed him by his shirt to keep him from leaving, as she felt calm with him. The girl was greatly afraid that she was going to lose the Duke. The doctor examined Roland, and already in the man's office, he told him that the examination showed no problems, and that it could have been simple fatigue. Dante remembered the thing he still couldn't give to the girl. There had been no reaction from Yoshita that day after he had picked it up, just as there was now. Jan came to the butler to find out how Lady Roland was feeling. Jean told him that the girl was already a little better, and if he was worried, he could just visit her. Ian was afraid to disturb the peace of the heroine. Although she, along with the Duke, had saved him at the auction and afterwards allowed him to serve her, but he felt that he was not worthy of it. The butler told the boy not to get worked up, for Roland would never see it that way. Jean assured him that there was nothing to worry about, so Ian had better put all his energies into the service. Suddenly, the lad sensed something amiss behind the strange door. The butler told them about the strict prohibition imposed by the Duke to approach this room, so they had to hurry back, for this room belonged to the past Duke and his wife. At this time, the princess was pondering about the strange symbols discovered around the emperor's palace. The high priest who had come for Duke Benedictus was looking for clues, and Titania decided to get Geller's opinion on what he thought about it. The man thought the prince was not involved. It was just that the relationship with the demons had gotten to the point where both the church and the Duke should have gotten involved. The princess assured her that Geller probably didn't know, but Theodore's love of turmoil was in his blood. That child would never hide his madness. No matter what the situation was, he never stopped acting out. If he liked something, it didn't matter if it was a human or an animal, because he would get his way at any cost. The list of people who had gone missing and ended up in Theodore's collection was not so small. Geller didn't understand how the imperial family and the church could allow such a thing to happen. It was all because the prince never left a trace behind him. If there was no proof, it was impossible to punish a member of the imperial family because of mere speculation. The man thought that since Titania was a princess, she could take advantage of her family's greatness to have Theodore punished. The girl praised the innocence of the guard, but she had no intention of punishing the prince, and she wanted him to keep doing more and more crazy things. It took Rolina 2 days to recover, and the whole time she didn't know what was going on outside. The Duke didn't understand if it was really that necessary to come to the last day of the ball. Dante thought that the girl should have rested a little more, because attending the ball required a lot of energy. The heroine became very uncomfortable remembering how she had grabbed the man's hand with a pitiful look, telling him not to leave. The girl was very disturbed by the dream she had seen, so she had a bad feeling, as if something bad was going to happen. Rolina assured that she was really fine and completely healthy. The Duke, with a grim face, informed her that the ball would most likely be cancelled. In the morning, the knights were searching around the imperial palace, and an unidentified body was found in the garden near the ball venue. It was unnaturally disfigured to the point that it was impossible to even determine who it could be. Theodore could no longer stand the loud talk of the aristocracy. The butler suggested to just send them away, but the man thought it was not so bad to let silly things happen. Because of the incident, some of the nobles and Templars requested an audience with the prince. The young man wondered what the Duke of Benerit was doing now, and if he had come around. Dante engaged the Knights of Light and the priests to look for possible connections to the demons. Suddenly, a river of blood spurted from Theodore's mouth, and the butler stirred. The prince realized that if this continued, he wouldn't last much longer. It looked like he wouldn't be able to meet anyone after all, and instead, the young man ordered the butler to tell everyone that he accepted all their offers. The action returns to Rolina's room, where the Duke said that he did not know what dangers might be in the courtyard, so it was better for the girl to stay in the manor. Dante promised to go there for the sake of investigation, but it could take several days. The heroine realized that the Duke was right, and for the sake of safety, It was better not to visit the palace for the time being because of this incident. The girl tried to calm herself down, but the sense of danger still beat anxiety for the Duke. Rowena ran outside so that he would remember her words, that as long as he was in the imperial palace, no matter how close he was to the emperor, he was not to betray himself. She had a bad feeling because this time she saw something in her dream. Libertus interrogated what the girl meant when she spoke of the dream. The priest had come to see the Duke because of a big problem in the palace, but now he wanted to get to know Dante's mistress better. Rowena immediately realized that the man was the priest, as the fact that the opposite energies were touching made her feel very sick. The man wanted to do something else, but the Duke wouldn't let him. Libet began to say that he only wished to say hello to the girl. Dante defended the girl because she had overworked over the last few days, and therefore Rowena was not feeling well. The sensation of body movement was not to be, and the girl had to calm down. The Duke suggested that the priest should drop all greetings and go to the imperial palace together. Libet thought that since the Duke's doctor couldn't help the girl, it was worth it for him personally to take a look at the problem. Dante reminded the man not to use the third servant's power without permission. Then he offered to call another priest, since they had all the highest clergy in the empire at their disposal. Roland insisted she was fine, but there was no way the priest was going to let her go. Back in her room, the girl thought she was engaged in a dangerous business, for Libet was a priest. Under the pretext that heroine needed to go away, she was able to buy some time. In this situation, the girl had no time to think. Though Libet called himself a priest, Roland knew he was actually someone else. She was greatly surprised to learn that the man possessed Jorah's power. He gave off the feeling that he could look right into a person's soul. The heroine wanted to avoid contact with this priest at all costs. There was no way the girl could refuse the trip, as it would embarrass the Duke. Betty insisted that the heroine should not go anywhere, for not much time had passed since she had fainted, and the affair looked very tiresome. Roland thanked the maid for her concern, but she wasn't that fragile and could take care of herself. She promised that if she felt tired, she would go straight to bed and not make a move. So much had happened lately that Betty's concerns seemed natural. The Duke walked to the heroine's door, saying that everything was ready and they could depart. The man was worried, as he thought the girl seemed uncomfortable around Libertus. The Duke was now treating the temple with extreme caution, even though his family was known for a close relationship with the temple that had been building for a dozen years. It was inevitable that the pair would have to travel to the imperial palace accompanied by Libertus, so they should have stayed away from that priest. Rowena was lucky as they were able to travel separately from the priest. Libet thought that the Duke had business to attend to and that he could escort the girl to meet the high priest. Dante insisted that his assistant had already alerted the head of the temple to the situation, and since the priest had come there because of what had happened in the imperial palace, they should go together. Libertus immediately gloomed, but still agreed to the proposal. It was the man's first time meeting an aristocrat with a very strange aura, so he wanted to get closer to her to get a better look. Stefan came to escort Roland, as she looked very exhausted. It was unknown why, but the heroine was very nervous before meeting the high priest. Stefan could understand the girl, for he himself had been surprised to learn that Priest Libet had come from the temple in person. He was the strongest of the existing clerics, and he was considered to be one of the best in the temple of Eora. The temple also actively supported this ball dedicated to the victory, so Stefan assumed that the priest would be interested in the investigation. The heroine went to the main hall and was greatly surprised to see a lot of dancing aristocrats as the ball was cancelled, because the criminal remained at large. The girl thought it was strange, because a ball that had been cancelled couldn't go on, as if nothing had happened. Concerned, Stefan said in a hurry that for some reason the ball was going on, and he also heard that fireworks were going to be set off at the murder scene. Roland realised that this was all a trap for the Duke. She immediately ran to the garden, pushing everyone along the way. At this time, the Nepian envoy was watching. The more he looked at the ball, the more disgusted he became. The man thought that it was the aristocrats who had driven him to hell. They were quietly enjoying themselves and taking pleasure in a place sprinkled with the blood of Nepian. The messenger promised that the price the Duke would pay would be high. The princess came to Theodore to inquire why the latter so defiantly allowed the ball to go on. The prince was the only one who dared to oppose his majesty. The princess didn't understand why Theodore ignored her words and did as he pleased. The man said he wasn't ignoring anything. He just thought it would be a pity if, after a long lull, the ball ended like this. Titania was furious, for a man had been killed in the palace and the body burned so badly that there was no way to even identify him. The prince just wanted to do something amazing, and he didn't care so much that a person had died. At this insolence, the guard had already taken up his sword. Theodore was surprised that the man wanted to raise his sword at a member of the imperial family. The princess noticed that the young man's character hadn't changed a bit, so she told him to do what he wanted, but she would prevent him in every way possible. Theodore was counting on his sister, because she could see a lot more interesting things. Roland ran out into the garden, where there were many aristocrats, and it was getting more crowded by the second. In such a situation, those who were targeting the Duke could have infiltrated the palace. Dante wondered why there was such chaos in the garden. No one knew anything, so he personally went to investigate the situation. On the way, the Duke noticed a sad little girl who began to apologize, admitting her guilt. The girl argued that she just wanted to look at the fireworks more closely, but then she got lost. The Duke ordered to find out whose child it was and immediately take her away from the scene. The man asked what the girl was doing here, for the ball had been cancelled. The little girl refuted these words, as she heard that it was supposed to continue from a minute to a minute. At that moment, a frightened Roland came running to Dante, saying that they had to leave immediately. In the girl's mind, there was a voice from the lead that there was only one person who could get close to the Duke, and he had to hand him the gift, standing next to him without a drop of awkwardness. The key was Dante's beloved, and the gift was death. Heroine's watch appeared in her hands. She may not have known the culprit, but he was using her to hurt the Duke. The girl realized that people had gathered in the square to see the fireworks marking the end of the festivities, and someone could have been hurt in the meantime. Dante began to ask what the girl meant when she talked about running away. Roland couldn't get her voice out of her head while the Duke worried, for the girl, as her complexion had changed drastically. The heroine was going to return to the manor to stay out of the man's way. Suddenly, the clock began to emit a strange energy, after which the girl realized that it was already too late. The girl ordered everyone to evacuate immediately and not to get too close to her. The man asked Roland to come to him and leave with him. The heroine couldn't go for it, as Nevan wanted to destroy everything with this energy, to make a place where no one could survive. A huge pillar of light rose into the sky, after which the girl disappeared and fireworks lit up the sky. Dante couldn't believe what was happening. It had turned out worse than Theodore had thought, but still, that wasn't the main thing. The sound died down and everything fell into darkness for Heroine. She was beginning to despair, but suddenly she saw a light. As soon as the girl touched it, she saw Inez. Inez said that what had happened was exactly what Roland had wanted to happen. In the priestess's hands was a blob of the very same dark energy, which she tore apart with ease. The girl thought it was a dream, but Inez refuted her suspicions, for their power was not so simple. The heroine knew this, for the Force had warned her of what might happen in the near future. Inez asked who she was, receiving the answer that she was a priestess of Nevan, who no longer existed. The priestess confirmed that she was Neran's first minister. The ancient scriptures spoke of the light of Jorah rising above all living things, and on the other side, the darkness of Jorah, ruling over death and that which is on the brink. As a servant of Nevan, Inez was one of those who saw death come to men, and who was responsible for escorting the dying to the river Styx. Roland realized that this wasn't just a dream predicting the future. Since the girl couldn't see what was right in front of her nose, she wondered why Inez had given her the power. The heroine didn't understand why the priestess destroyed the watch, because it was the watch that helped her see what would happen in the future. Inez made no attempt to stop the girl, especially since she had said she wished to intervene. The priestess asked her to remember that if Roland tried to go against fate, she would have to pay a very heavy price for it. Lugan held the girl in his arms, waiting for her to come to her senses. He wanted to protect her from afar, but in the moment, things did not turn out in his favor. The girl woke up and was very surprised to find a man holding her and high in the sky. Lugan explained that she had just come back from the brink between life and death. Roland finally realized that all this was not a dream, but the whole border between life and death. The man advised against showing his power to people, but the girl needed to go back and make sure the ball was over without incident. Lugan thought it was best for the heroine to stay. The time on the edge lasted less than in the real world, and because of that, it had been a week since Roland had gone missing. The Duke and his guards were going crazy as they searched for her, and especially Liebert. The man suggested that heroine not make a pitying face and consider staying with him. The girl could not stay with him, for she had to go back now. She didn't understand why Lugan appeared out of nowhere and said such strange things. The criminal offered to protect Roland, because that way no one could harm her. Although the situation was quite absurd, but she could definitely tell now that she saw another person in the depths of her eyes. At the temple, the Duke was asked to tell at least something about the missing person. The priests wondered what had happened during the fireworks, for Libertus claimed that he had sensed an ominous aura then. They thought that the instigator of all this was Dante's beloved. The girl had drawn all this misery to herself and said she would come to find the Duke and the knights, and ran away. To the priests, this was the best proof that Roland had conspired with the remnants of the demonic race. Dante declared that heroine was not a criminal, but everyone only began to accuse her more. The priests thought that the girl had no reason to run away because she could just prove her innocence. The Duke thought that Roland might have been kidnapped by a real criminal. Liebert began to say that they couldn't explain the lady's abnormal disappearance. Besides, he had felt the sinister energy when he was there, so it was definitely about demons, and the Duke most likely knew it. All members of the Bennerit family had to completely obey the will of the Yor Church. In the pub, people were unhappy with the increase of knights in the neighbourhood. No one knew exactly what had happened, for there was only a rumour about how the remnants of the demons had gone on a killing spree in the palace garden. Her companion didn't believe it was true, but the young man claimed that someone was still left behind. For all he knew, some aristocrat was involved, and she was being sought after everywhere. The angry bartender began to demand Rolina's order so he wouldn't have to throw her out. Lugan asked him to take his order, and to prepare a better room for him, since he had nowhere else to go. In the room, the criminal told that he had come to this tavern on purpose, as the girl did not trust him. The heroine was sure that Lugan could have contacted Nevan. She asked to be shown so she could see everything with her own eyes, and make sure. The case was spreading everywhere, and the search team was already looking for the girl. Like Roland said, he did try to kill the Duke at the behest of Nevan, but then changed his mind, as it was all before he met the girl. The heroine repeated that she wasn't Inez, but the man already knew that. The girl was still accused of being involved in the incident in the garden, so she should have joined Lugan in this situation. Now that Roland understood the whole situation, she was going to go back to the Duke to get him to help her. The man said that Dante and the church were in the same boat, as the Bennerit family had very close ties to the church. Lugan asked the girl to join him, for he was not going to deceive her, and as proof of that, he could teach her how to control her powers properly. The man reminded her that the heroine had recently foreseen the future and had also been able to reach the edge. All of this only happened because of a dark serpent that mistook the girl's powers for food. The serpent became an irritant, and Rolina's powers were stimulated and unlimited. There would be many problems if it continued to feed on the girl, so Lugan took it back. The door once opened was the same, and it was all out of her control, so as a side effect, the power could manifest at any time. The man said that the more Roland saw the creatures that were about to die, the more her soul was consumed. Lugan turned the serpent into a bracelet and ordered him not to eat too much. The girl needed it for her own safety, for it could suppress her powers. With the bracelet, for a long time, Roland didn't have to see something like that in her dreams. Suddenly, the man remembered that there were announcements running through the streets of the city. They stated that the Duke's sweetheart was suspected of murder at the ball. Lady Roland Diaz, who is known to be the Duke's lover, was linked to a demonic race. the heroine thought it was all just a misunderstanding and hoped it was the same as with the rumors about Dante. Now the church was even mentioning the girl's name, and if they continued to do something like this, her family would be in serious danger. Roland made up her mind after all, and asked for Lugan's help, as she couldn't let more trouble happen. The girl had dyed her hair and now looked completely different. With this disguise, they didn't have to worry about being discovered. However, Rowena didn't like the colour of her hair. Before taking action, the heroine decided to stop by the store and inquire about an employee named Loss. It was the first time the saleswoman had heard that name. She thought he had quit, but that was impossible, because the woman had been running the store for 10 years and had never hired anyone with the name Loss. Rowena walked out of the store depressed, for she was sure he worked there. The heroine thought about it and remembered that in the past, after the first failed attempt to kill the Duke at Viscount Wilton's mansion, it seemed that it had all been covered up before it was known. After that, the rumour about Roland and Dante spread. Furthermore, as of now, there had been no official statements after the incident at the palace. Despite all of this, the news that the girl was a criminal was all over the neighbourhood. The timing and circumstances were perfect, so the situation was under the full control of the real culprit. The heroine realised that it was a trap, and everything from the beginning was in the hands of the culprit. At this rate, Roland could continue to make mistakes if she acted thoughtlessly. Just like Inez said, the girl was too stubborn with these dreams for seeing the future. The heroine became afraid that even if she started walking carefully, she would still fail and mess up everything. However, if the girl got a bad reputation for being involved with demons, her family would simply be destroyed. Roland couldn't let that happen to the family she was trying her best to protect. Lugan noticed the people from the church, and the girl immediately decided to leave as soon as possible. The man reminded her that Roland looked very different now, and she just needed to calm down. The girl began to assure herself that even though she was the prime suspect, and now the church was after her, she must not give up, or her family would be finished. Lugan was very interested in the girl's reaction, as it was fundamentally different from Inez's. Roland did not understand why the man was smiling. She was begging him for help with a feeling as if she was trying to clutch at straws to save her life, and it annoyed her greatly. The heroine wanted to find out from Lugan if he knew about Nevan's hideout or anything like that. Most of the time, criminals came to the man first. At the auction house, last time, Nevan had followed Rolena's power flow and gotten there. The girl thought of something and asked Lugan to do her a favour, from which he was incredibly happy. The heroine smiled nervously and asked for some money, after which the man's face became sullen. At the Duke's estate, Betty tried to break into the girl's room and find out everything. She read a flyer that said Rowena was in big trouble. The maids asked the butler to let them through to the exit, but then Dante appeared and said it was impossible. They had to be patient, and if the girls left the mansion, it would attract the attention of the church. The man asked for more thought, since the maid herself knew how people associated with the demonic race were treated in the Church of Eeyore. Betty didn't believe that Roland had anything to do with demons. The Duke had assured her that even if it really wasn't possible, the church would still only look for answers that favoured them. The Duke withdrew to a quiet place and there asked the butler if there was any news. There was nothing new in the city or on the part of the church. The young man wondered if Roland was really connected to the demon race, and since the girl had disappeared before Dante's eyes, he knew exactly the right answer. The man denied any connection to the demons, saying that the heroine was just a pawn in this game, a sacrifice that was needed right at the beginning of the game. At the restaurant, Roland wanted to clarify some things about Lugan's identity and his relationship with Nevan. The girl had already figured some things out, but she wanted to be sure. The heroine began to question how the man knew her past name, what kind of reincarnation ability he had, and how he was connected to Nevan. It could be that Lugan wasn't from this world either. A long time ago, Lugan slept for a very long time, and one day, a man approached him. The man didn't know how the man broke the seal and got him, but still the man woke the dragon, and in return he was given some of Lugan's power. Rowena wanted to know that man's name, but the man could not reveal it. Because of the contract, He could not give a name, but the girl thought he was joking. Lugan said that he recognized Inez, since she was his only debtor in the past. When he saw Roland, he thought that whoever possessed Inez's soul would surely remember him. In the past, only one person could make contracts, so when the girl saw the criminal in her dream, that symbol seemed familiar to her. She remembered a little about her past life, and for that reason, she couldn't understand where exactly she had seen him. Roland had no idea that the more she learned, the more questions she had that were unanswered in a vague past and an uncertain future. Lugan saw the heroine's pensive face and pulled out a bag of gold coins. The man said there was human money in the sack, and he had a lot of it, so the girl could safely take it. Roland immediately suggested that Lugan should be close to each other. The feeling of money was clearing the girl's mind, but she still should have calmed down. A girl with the same soul as Inez now sat before Lugan. Her character and appearance was different from hers, but he couldn't leave her. Still, it wasn't a bad thing at all. The man asked what the heroine would do now that she had money. Only Roland wanted to tell about her plans, as Jan suddenly ran in, happy that he was able to find the girl. Until today, the Duke had not had to accept Titania's summons, so the Duke was not very happy about this meeting. The princess reminded him that Dante was not only a temple knight, but also a duke. Titania ordered her lord not to let anyone interfere with her duel with the Duke. She needed to get away after the incident at the ball, and she was exhausted by the constant pain in her body. Dante duelled with the princess and was surprised by her speed. The man recognized that Titania's skills had improved greatly. The princess began to ask for news of Roland, but no one as yet knew anything. There was a possibility of a connection between the heroine and a race of demons, so the temple believed. If they found anything related to demons, they would be very annoyed. It seemed to Titania that the girl was not a bad person, so she offered her help to the Duke. Dante didn't remember how long it had been since Roland had disappeared. She had disappeared without a trace, as if she hadn't even been there, and then suddenly appeared near the Duke just like that time, so he hoped she was all right. Helor wasn't sure if the Duke would do as the princess wished. Rolina was rumoured to be only a lover, but it could be that their feelings were more complicated than they seemed. The heroine was not the type to make decisions rashly. The girl was most likely well aware that Theodore was involved in the incident. Rolina was the best weapon to control the Duke of Benerit. The girl left the restaurant, asking Lugan why Jan recognized her, since she looked so different. The young man suggested that since he was from the desert, he might have special powers. Wastelanders were unusual people, and their abilities sometimes manifested themselves. Lugan wanted to touch Jan, but he shied away from him, as if he were very afraid. The young man asked Rolina to return to the Duke because he was desperately looking for her. Jan told her that ever since he started living on the estate, the Duke had ordered him to protect heroine, so he had been commanded to find the girl, but then he had been unable to continue the search. Roland realized that Dante knew of Ian's abilities and had ordered him to serve her, just because of that. The girl asked the young man to do her one favor, as she needed the ability of the desert men for tracking. Ian explained that his ability was not omnipotent, and there were many conditions, but first he had to meet the man at least once. In one of the stores, the girl finally found Los. At that time, Jan, together with Lugan, stood around the corner and waited for the right moment. The young man felt awkward, and even his first days at the mansion seemed more fun than this situation. Jan was very scared, as Lugan had changed a lot as soon as Roland left. The young man assumed that the man was from the desert, but the man did not answer that question, only wanting to hear why he thought that. Ian was born in the desert, but grew up in a village on the border of the kingdom, where he was arrested and taken away. The kidnappers were testing how the young man reacted to different objects. Lugan wanted to speak out about the humans, but suddenly he felt a presence and went to greet the guest. Sered, the guardian of the world, appeared out of thin air right in front of the man. The girl didn't understand why he was so stubborn, because she had asked him not to get involved in such things. Though Lugan had broken the rules, he couldn't imagine what the keeper could do with his body. The man's debtor had broken the seal, plus he was paying good money, so freedom was a gift. Serad insisted that if everything was done for the debtor, it was a violation of the rules for Roland to help. The Guardianess attempted to take away Lugan's powers to ensure that history would not repeat itself. Serad suppressed the man's powers, as those had not yet fully recovered. People like them were very dangerous to the world, as in the incident where a man fell in love with a human and used his power to burn a huge forest to the ground. Los invited the girl to tea, asking how she recognized him. Roland remembered that she had changed her appearance, so no one recognized her. It was very risky to reveal her identity now, but she had no other choice. The girl recalled asking the man to find a book when he worked at the bookstore. Los began to ask how the girl was related to Lady Roland. The heroine explained that she was the missing girl. The man was very surprised, but readily accepted the information. Roland held out a sheet with the news that had travelled all over the kingdom. The girl realised that the Falcon Guild had done all of this, and not once, but twice. Rumours quickly crept in at the moment of the mess. The heroine wanted to know what they had accomplished by making her the most popular topic of gossip. It all started with the rumour that Roland was Dante van Bennerit's mistress. The entire elite gossiped about her. It all ended with the girl appearing with the Duke at the graduation party. Then also the criminal used her to harm the man, so everything was planned from the beginning, and the source of these gossips was Falcon, who was definitely connected with Nevan. Los asked not to take it personally, because they were just collecting gossip. It went so far because everyone liked stories like that. The man apologised, for they were only saying what they wanted to hear from them. With that attitude, Rolina was about to report to Falcon for the damage done. It no longer mattered to heroine where the truth was and where the lies were. Los himself had said that the people here really liked provocative stories, so if Roland let them gossip about Falcon, everything should be fine. The girl could quietly prove that the company had helpers in that incident. The man agreed to anything to keep their secret. First, Roland demanded that he make up a new story for her, the opposite of the one that was going around now. It was necessary to spread a rumour that the girl had been kidnapped by a criminal and was now also a victim. After the story broke, the heroine demanded that most of the transactions be sent to her as an apology. The man insisted that it was too much, since it was their policy not to run the business at a loss. Roland explained that it wasn't a loss, since she had prepared a reward. It wasn't that Los didn't want to apologise to the girl, but he still offered to give good news in lieu of duty. The man could tell about the man who was known to be heroine's lover, his relationship with the temple, and why the Bennerit family was in hiding. In front of the emperor's chambers, Theodore met the princess. The man heard that the disease was progressing and the ruler's condition was worsening. Titania did not understand why, when the emperor was in such a state, he just walked around the palace and did nothing. Theodore said that it wasn't that. It was just that now that the head of the country was in a critical condition, it was his duty to make sure that no one would take his place. According to rumours, the Great Noble Conference was about to be held very soon, where it would be decided who would become the emperor's successor. The princess had heard about it, but it was up to the emperor himself to choose a successor. And even if he wasn't conscious, he was still alive, so the aristocracy was just rushing things. Theodore insisted that the emperor's condition was getting worse and worse. Since the remnants of the demon race that were thought to have been destroyed were disturbing the palace and making people nervous, they urgently needed to find a new leader to stabilize the situation. Titania laughingly began to state that the commission wanted someone who wouldn't faint at any moment. The princess asked the man to do his best and try to remove the smell of blood. Theodore was very surprised that Titania knew about his illness. The man asked when Miller would arrive already, but the man was already in the palace. The messenger brought the prince an elixir that was supposed to help his body recover. Roland returned from her conversation with Los and did not catch Lugan with Jan. The young man told her how he had left suddenly and still hadn't returned. The man liked to suddenly disappear and suddenly appear, so the girl knew that he should come soon. Suddenly, the heroine's disguise disappeared, causing the young man to panic a lot. Ian wanted to go and ask for the Duke's help, but the girl couldn't drag him into it, as she was sure that Dante was being followed. The young man felt the aura emanating from the carriage and began to lead Roland closer to her. In the carriage, Asher said he would help the girl. It was good that he recognized them, otherwise the guards would have grabbed them and arrested them. The heroine wondered how Jan met the man. The one told her that as soon as the young man got rid of the auction house, Escher took care of him. Ian worked as a servant for him for a while, and then he was called back to the Duke to serve Roland. The man immediately realized that they needed to find a place to hide first. The heroine only asked that they not tell the Duke anything. Escher was surprised by the request, since Dante had been looking everywhere for Roland. The girl asked him not to think about it, saying that she would contact him herself later and it wouldn't take long. Since the girl was in such a situation, Escher should have avoided her later. At the Marquis Alexis's estate, the butler apologized to Dante for the long wait, for Escher had already reported that he would be back soon. The man got out of the carriage and asked to escort his secret guests, who were sitting in the carriage, to a spare room. The Marquis greeted the Duke in the reception room. The man said that Dante should have contacted him earlier. Escher offered to sit down and chat right away. The Duke said that since it was difficult for the Bennerit family to take any action at this stage, he had asked the Marquis to search for the girl in foreign lands through the troops. Escher looked away, thinking that it didn't matter how much effort he put in. After all, he couldn't find Roland just because of the colour of her hair. But in any case, today, she had suddenly appeared right at his carriage. The Duke didn't understand why the man was so hesitant, although the girl asked the Marquis not to tell Dante about her. But still one day, the Duke during the blue moon asked him for help. Escher really wanted to tell everything about it, for the man would owe him afterward. Dante asked to tell everything while he was still very polite. The Marquis nervously began to make excuses for not having found the girl, though it was obvious quite the opposite. Recently, shortly before all this, the Duke had sent a letter to Cornelia. Even if Escher had gotten along with her when they were children, they were completely different people now. The man had darkened when Dante had said that Cornelia had left the Marquis because she was tired of a guy like him. Escher had always thought that wasn't true and kept looking for her, so now he just had to give information about Roland, and in return, the Duke promised to tell him about Cornelia. The Marquis realized the absurdity of the situation, that they were exchanging information about the people they were looking for. He worried that the Bennerit family was under special surveillance, and if the priests asked him to extradite Lady Roland, he would have to do so. Dante is forced to look for the real culprit anyway, so first the man had to tell where the heroine was. The butler gave Rolina the dress that the lady used to wear, after which he showed a separate room that no one used. The man said that if the girl needed anything, she could tell Jan, since the latter had worked for the Marquis at the estate before. The heroine went out on the balcony and wondered whether she had been right to decide not to return to the Duke, whether it was true that Dante had allowed Jan to stay with her to keep watch, and what was the main secret of the Bennerit family that everyone was talking about. Rolina was getting more and more interested, but she didn't want to hear anything about this place. Suddenly, a concerned Duke appeared in front of the girl, from which the girl was very surprised. Somewhere in the shadows, the members of Nepean were talking about the fact that if they took a swing at this lady, their existence could be revealed. The man assured her that there was no reason to worry, then ordered that his edict be passed on to all members of the organization, that the prince would eventually end up in their hands. So it was time to let the world know of Nepean's existence. Rolina stammered and went into her room, not realizing what Dante was doing at the Escher Manor. The girl was afraid that because the Duke was a Knight of the Shining who had received the title from the church, he might inform the temple that he had found her. In any case, it wasn't time for that yet, and Roland shouldn't be caught at a time like this, so she needed to hide somewhere. From the door of the room, the Duke wanted to speak to the girl, but she asked him to pretend that the man had not seen her, because she did not want to burden him anymore. Dante could not agree with the girl, thinking that she was talking nonsense. The man asked to open the door, because he wanted to see with his own eyes that Roland was all right. The girl opened the door, and the Duke rushed to embrace her. For a second he thought that everything he saw was just an illusion. Dante wondered if Roland realized how desperate he'd been when she'd disappeared after that explosion. He had been very afraid that he would lose the heroine again. After a while, the Duke came to his senses and let the girl go, not stopping to apologize that he had just acted very rudely. It wasn't what the girl had meant, and anyway, Seeing how much the man cared for her now made her very happy. Dante reminded her that he had asked Rowlena to call him by his first name. It had never been so difficult for the heroine to utter a single word as it was now. She was just afraid to address the man that way, and she was getting it wrong more and more. Dante was a hero of the Empire and a knight of the Shining. The girl feared that she would subconsciously take it for granted to be around such a man. Through his binoculars, the Marquis watched the lovely scene in Roland's room from a neighbouring building. He simply could not believe his eyes that he was seeing such a side of Dante, so he simply could not miss such an opportunity. At that moment, the servant realised why the Duke couldn't stand Escher. The Duke began to ask where Roland had been all this time, for he had looked everywhere but could not find her. The girl revealed that it had been a long time since she woke up from her coma. Because of the situation where heroine was wanted as a criminal, she didn't want to show her face. In the meantime, Ian looked after the girl, and it was his acquaintance that brought her to the Marquis' estate. The Duke asked why Roland did not return to him. The girl could not do so, for it would only confuse the man. It was nothing but a disagreement with the church, assuming she was a criminal and persecuting her, and Dante was a knight of the church, for which reason she could not return. The Duke hesitated and decided to ask another question. The girl had told him to stay away from this place that day, so he didn't understand why Roland would do such a reckless thing. Before answering, the man asked not to be warned of the danger as he had been that time, for there was no need for it from now on. The heroine couldn't let the Duke be put in danger because of her. She couldn't just stand by and watch what would happen to him. The girl saw no point in saying anything else, and she regretted acting so recklessly. But she needed to rest now. Left alone, Roland reflected that the Duke was right, and things did go wrong when she interfered. She remembered Inez's words that this was not a prophetic dream. As the spiritual priest of Nevan that ruled over death, she should have just stayed back and watched the darkness of death approach the humans and not interfere anymore. Thanks to Lugan's bracelet, the girl no longer had any leads. In the corridor, the Duke met Jan, after which the man began to say that the young man should have reported to him that he had found the girl. Jan's excuse was that the situation was too serious. Besides, Roland had told him not to say anything to Dante. Marquis was angry that the Duke was questioning the boy. Ian was too confused to inform the people of the church about it. Escher had taken good care of heroine, so there was no point in worrying so much. So the Duke should have looked for the real culprit, because that was the only way to prove Roland's innocence. At Duke Benerit's estate, all the servants began to notice that the atmosphere of the mansion was becoming too strange. With the exception of a few, most of the people had been exiled. The maid heard that after his return, Dante had gone down to the basement and still hadn't come out of there. This room, like the door to the cellar that had been locked since the time the Duke became head, was now open again. There was a crypt in the basement, and as soon as the man approached it, Ioshita began to react to the girl. The one didn't understand what was going on, for the Duke had said he would never need her hand. At the moment, no one could sense the energy of the demon race as well as this girl named Ioshita. Roland came to meet the Marquis because she had heard that he wanted to see her. The man was uncomfortable, for the girl had asked to stay to tell Dante. It didn't matter to heroine now, because it was nothing compared to the fact that Escher had allowed her to stay at his estate. The Marquis assumed that they were lovers, and the Duke was concerned about that, so the girl was uncomfortable with the gossip. In fact, Roland just wanted Dante to change his attitude towards her. Although Escher couldn't say that he wouldn't get in trouble because of the girl, but his situation was much better than Dante's. The man asked not to worry, as his father and mother were also marquises, and his people were completely classified. Roland turned pale as she realised that the Duke was in a very bad situation, and perhaps a faction of the church was going to hurt him. The Marquis began to ask what made her think that, and what she knew about the relationship between the Benerit family and the church. The heroine had only heard that they were different from what everyone had seen. Escher added that Dante should have told the girl about it. When he was the young man's supporter and protector, he figured out that he might have been involved with something. The Duke's real personality was not the same as it was now, but after staying at the temple when he was still a child, something had completely changed him. Apparently exchanging with the temple was an old tradition of House Benerit. When the children of the family reached a certain age, they were sent to the church. Escher didn't know exactly what had happened then, but the guy who used to smile even when he was a little sullen, and this young man had completely changed. Dante's eyes were empty, and all emotion had dried up. He continued to stay like that without saying a word, and only said that he had to get the sacred sword before he left. Then, Roland herself knew that the Duke had received the sacred sword and became a Knight of the Radiance, and he was also the leader in the battle against the demon race. The Marquis, in any case, thought it was very lucky that this cold fish had a different attitude towards heroine. The girl decided to find out if the Marquis really had no doubts about her, because everyone said she was a criminal, but the man still helped her to hide. Escher explained that it was all because the one who had witnessed it from beginning to end said that Roland was innocent. It turned out that there were many people on the Duke's side who believed and supported him. Although Escher said that everything was fine, however, the girl wanted to solve the issue of housing. Roland no longer saw visions, and now the darkness of the Duke's death worried her greatly. Suddenly someone asked why the girl looked so depressed. The man put on his glasses and asked her to calm down, because he was Los. Roland asked how the man had gotten into her room. Los told her that he had been following her, as her location was very significant information. The heroine realized that the man didn't look as stupid as he did the first time they met. The girl said that if he came for a deal, it was too late, and such rude behavior meant that he didn't want to cooperate with her. Los had done nothing of the sort. By coming to Roland, he was accepting the deal. The man just wanted to add some convincing, after which the girl noticed that she couldn't move. Lady Roland Diaz could do nothing about the criminal, and after the incident, she was kidnapped by a demonic race and disappeared. Los wondered if heroine would like such a rumour, for it was the girl he had come for. Roland began to faint, and the man decided to make it clear that he was not Los, but Icarus, the head of Nevan, and in the future everything would be connected exactly with the girl. In the morning, Jan came to Escher to tell him about the problem, as Lady Roland had disappeared. The butler began to say that such a thing was impossible, because there were many guards guarding the girl's room, but they did not notice anything strange. The young man searched the whole neighbourhood but never found her. The Marquis remembered Jan's special abilities and suggested using them, but the young man said that he had already tried it and it didn't work, as if he and Roland were in different worlds. At this time, the girl was lying on a bed in a dark and damp room. The heroine was completely exhausted and did not understand what was going on here. Suddenly, Penin and Piero from the auction, named Maria, came to the girl. Since these two were near Roland, it meant that she was in Nevan's lair. Maria immediately decided to explain that they had brought the girl at the request of their leader. Roland realized that there was nothing she could do now, as her body had not recovered, and she should have kept her wits about her. The girl faced the leader and was very surprised that it was Los. The man repeated once more that his name was actually Icarus. The girl found out that the falcon had a connection with a demonic race, but she didn't expect Icarus to fool her and drag her to this place. The heroine questioned why the man needed glasses, because she thought he just liked to play roles. To Icarus, the very phrase demon race sounded ridiculous, as he didn't think it was horrible. The girl was very curious at first. Why she insisted on searching for the ancient book, Twilight Dark. How she translated an ancient language that had been forgotten for hundreds of years. All of this was curious to Icarus. Suddenly the girl turned pale and fell to her knees, asking what the man had done to her. Icarus assured him that he had only done a couple of checks, because normally no one could get in here. As he expected, Roland turned out to be a very interesting person, but it was strange that he could feel Lugan's energy in the girl. Icarus found himself indebted to the man, so he began to ask about her relationship with the criminal and how she could read in the forgotten language. The most important thing was that the energy inside Roland was different from that of a normal person. The girl did not understand Icarus. Then he began to say that if she could not understand everything now, then the next events would be too complicated for her. The heroine realized that now she was being played with, and in this situation she was only a means to satisfy curiosity. In such conditions, the girl decided to play with Icarus too. Roland began to say that although the man wanted to know about her relationship with Lugan, but she was not interested to reveal everything at once, so she suggested an exchange of information. Icarus immediately realized that they would both have a lot of fun. Maria was very bored because there was nothing interesting. Penin had asked her to help him with the experiments, but the girl didn't understand why she should be the one to do it. She saw the man's desires to use her teleportation skills in an experiment. Penin's task was to create a magic gimmick, so Maria decided to just loiter. The man insisted that it would be a good idea to use tools with magical powers for the other members of the clan. The girl didn't want that, thinking that her power belonged only to Sulphur Icarus, so she had no reason to worry about the others. Maria wondered what kind of girl Icarus had brought, and why Nevan needed her. Penin knew who this girl was, because by order of the leader he had investigated her, and as it turned out her personality was very special. All this a man must keep secret by order of the leader. Roland sat on the bed, thinking that she was definitely in Nevan's lair, and she couldn't believe that she had suddenly disappeared. Suddenly, Dr. Vale came into the room to check on the girl. He had heard that the heroine was not feeling well, so he wanted to examine the prisoner. The girl began to cry out that there was no need for this, as Vale was a member of Nevan, and she had no way of knowing what he would do to her. The man understood Rolina's wariness after the past events, but he had not come to her to harm her, for he simply wanted to help improve the girl's well-being. Vale explained that after the heroine arrived, Penin had researched her. At that time, the magic tool he used was slightly aggressive, and as a result of the reaction, the energy inside his body had gone bad, causing him to become exhausted. The doctor immediately needed to give medicine, but he wasn't available at that moment because the research was delayed. The man asked not to worry, and to get it over with as soon as possible, and he needed the heroine's hand first. Vale gave Roland the medicine, and the pain in her body began to slowly go away. The girl immediately thought that Vale was a priest of Eeyore, and was greatly surprised when it turned out that he was not. She didn't understand how someone who wasn't a priest could have such healing powers, or why Vale was in Nevan's demon lair. The man asked why the girl thought he shouldn't be here. Roland explained that healing abilities were usually a special power of the priests of the Temple of Eeyore, who controlled human life. Vale rather worked as a regular doctor, which revealed his healing abilities. He considered himself lucky, otherwise he would have been dragged into the temple. The heroine didn't understand what dragged meant. Then the man realized that the girl really didn't know anything, as if she was not of this world. The man asked, wondering why only the priests of the temple had healing abilities. The answer was that the temple had taken all people with such abilities, just as they had taken members of Vale's family. Roland was shocked, as this was the first time she had heard something like this. The doctor thought that the girl did not want to hear anything more and wanted to leave, but Roland asked him to tell everything so that she could decide for herself. The girl could not deny Vale's ability to heal, because he had not even received Eeyore's blessing. The man still decided to tell everything he knew. In the vague, distant past, many people had abilities like Vale's. Society called them transcendent men, and many of them followed the path of the priests to help others, while others refined their minds and souls and became enchanters. Roland insisted that it was all in the past, and no one had such powers now. Vale confirmed the girl's hunch, but some of the spellcasters still existed to this day. Perhaps the people of the Temple of Eeyore were afraid they would lose their current power, so they had gone to great lengths to find the remaining transcendent ones. In ancient times, there was a forest that had turned into the Deluta Desert. Because of the harsh conditions, it was inhabited by ethnic minorities, and it was amazing that there were many transcendent people among them. One day, the temple faction coveted from the ability, so they pressurized the people for a very far-fetched reason. Thus, war broke out between the Empire and the so-called demon race. Vale said that if Roland didn't believe him, that there was nothing that could be done, for that was what had actually happened. The so-called priests of the church had now gained power over the special people captured and used them to hold power. To fight against the faction of the church, an organization called Nevan was formed. Icarus came to Theodore while he was conducting a brutal interrogation. The man introduced himself as Loss of Nevan, saying that he was honored to meet the prince. Theodore revealed that the item Icarus had sent him was indeed working. It had been a long time since the prince's body had been in such a relieved and renewed state. The man was pleased to hear that, but he wondered what kind of person was lying on the ground. The prince said it was the slave he had just bought. Theodore thanked again for the object that the men from Nevan had handed him, for it had been a long time since he had felt as excited as he did now. Icarus wanted to get straight to the point, for he had come because he had heard that the prince wished to discuss something with him. Theodore thought that they didn't need to hurry anywhere, as they could just sit and rest for a while. Icarus apologized, saying that the leader's orders were that he had to return. The next time the prince asked the man to bring their leader with him, as he had nothing to say to someone who was not the leader. Theodore started asking if the drug had any side effects. He was so pleased with it, that's why he met someone like Icarus today. The man guessed that the prince never realized that the effect of the item lasted about a week, and after that time Theodore's body would have to return to its original state. When the prince realized this, he told Icarus to swallow his tongue if he thought he had insulted him and would be able to get out alive. The head of Nevan was confident that he would be able to get away. To date, the one who knows all the weaknesses of others is the only one in all trades holding the hilt of the knife. Icarus asked if the prince thought how many weaknesses he actually had. Nevan knew not only about Theodore's weak body on the outside, but also the secrets hidden inside. Even though the prince was only 7 years old, yet he was doing such things to his brother. Theodore was shocked by Icarus's awareness. The man thought that he had already gotten his mother's heart, so they could talk over all the details about Nevan's upcoming plans and about the prince. At this time, Roland was being led somewhere. The girl was confused, for she had not expected that Loss was Nevan's leader, and she did not know what to do with the information she had heard from the doctor. If what Vale had told Roland was true, it could be a headache. The Duke knew more about the church than anyone, so the girl wondered if Dante suspected she was special. Would he protect her from the people of the church? The heroine wasn't sure about that, because she didn't even know if Vale was telling the truth. Roland didn't understand why things like this always happened to her. When she first came to the capital, she never thought she would get bogged down in such things. It all started with her ambition to save the Duke, with a little help from the girl, because she hoped it would benefit the Diaz family. Now the girl was completely devastated and just wanted to go back. Roland missed the winds of her hometown. She didn't know if all was well with her mother, as she hadn't been able to contact Butler Wilson for a long time. The Duke had been informed that some knights had found a way to sneak in, and they would make their way here immediately. Eoshita said that the monsters kept coming, and if the Duke would release her, she would deal with them in one move. The girl assured her that the other knights shouldn't have suffered like that. Dante claimed that her role had ended the moment she'd led him to Nevan. Eoshita didn't understand the Duke's persistence, telling him to stop acting like this and just use her. The spirit added that the girl named Roland that Dante was looking for was nearby in the castle. Roland thought the door didn't appear to be closed, but she didn't know if she had the ability to open it. The heroine had been waiting for a long time for an opportunity to escape, and now for the first time she had a chance to get out of the room. The girl couldn't linger any longer, wanting to get out of the castle. Icarus appeared behind her, saying that Roland would be in trouble if she damaged the window. The man finally realized why the girl wanted to run away. However, it was better for her to stay with Nevan, since she was a special person. All special people would be in danger if the people of the church could find them. Roland was even more special than everyone else, therefore it was even more dangerous. The heroine didn't understand what the man was talking about, but the man told her that he had figured out everything about her. For starters, because Roland's power was hidden by Lugan, Icarus had a hard time coming to a conclusion. He owed him a favor though, so it wasn't hard to find the girl. Icarus concluded that the heroine possessed Nerian's power of bottomless darkness. The man assured her that there was no point in running away, for that curiosity that had arisen when Icarus had first seen the girl in the bookstore was no longer there. The head of Nevan thought that Lugan only cared for her because of Nerian's power. Even so, Roland thought, there was no reason for her to get involved with the man. The heroine was completely on no one's side. Icarus realized that the girl really didn't understand what the problem was. A couple centuries ago, no special people possessed the dark energy of Nevan. Absolutely no one. Yet now there was Roland, the only one with such power. The heroine was a miracle that would crush Eeyore. Suddenly Icarus realized that the guards had come, so he asked the girl to think well about everything, because Nevan would always accept her. The girl didn't understand what kind of nonsense the man was talking about, saying that she would never believe him. Icarus was hurt by these words, as he told everything to apologize to the girl. The man asked to forget what he had brought Roland to the castle, without her consent, for all the girl needed now was to make a choice. The heroine fell to her knees, not understanding how this was possible. As it turned out, Icarus during the conversation reminded the girl of Count Diaz. The man could arrange a meeting with him if the girl agreed to join Nevan. Roland opened her eyes and saw the Duke in front of her. The knights searched the entire castle and found no demons, for they had fled as soon as the guards broke in. The knight noticed the girl and immediately realized that it was Lady Roland, whom the Duke had been looking for a long time. The guards wanted to protect the girl, but Dante wouldn't let them. Taking her in his arms, he said he would take care of her himself. The Duke sent a second group of knights after the demons, although he wanted to pursue them personally, but there was a chance that it would be handed over to the faction of the church. The girl said that everything was fine, so the man should have let her go. On top of that, she was going to discuss Nevan. The Duke interrupted the girl, saying that they would discuss it later, as they would still have many opportunities. The knights realized the situation and decided to go look around. Lugan suggested Ceres turn the game into a cat-and-mouse game. Since the debtor was calling him out, the girl could no longer tie him to her. The girl let the dragon go, asking how much longer he would be involved. The man realized that when it came to the contract, not even Ceres could clean up her act, for it was the only way they could participate in the intrigues of the world. The girl couldn't understand how an ordinary man could find Lugan and make an ancient contract with him. Since Ceres did not want to answer his questions, the man promised that if she disturbed him again, he would not let her go so easily next time. The little girl was worried about Icarus, asking if he had a cold. The man did not know that, for he had just sneezed. The girl said that if he was sick, he urgently needed to take medicine to get better. Participant Nevan reported that only a small number of people from the capital were able to escape with Maria's power. The Duke, for lack of evidence, was soon to arrive there. It was difficult for Maria to evacuate so many people at once. The man revealed that it was only through intuition that he guessed Dante would arrive soon. The participant didn't understand why Icarus left the capital, as it was the perfect opportunity to kill the Duke. It wasn't that simple, for Dante was protected by pure light. The results of the observation showed that neither the huge damage nor the poison worked on the Duke, so they could not kill him with the usual methods. All hope was only in Roland, as pure light would never compare to pure darkness. Icarus had ordered something to be prepared, but Panan doubted that his research capabilities at the moment would allow for it. The head told him that the forces were already here, and now only Panan was active outside, and from now on he should gradually adapt to life here. The entire village they were in was Nevan's true base. It was time for the world to learn about an organization of demons called Nevan. Moreover, the soldiers had saved Roland. She had already had the chance to be a suspect in an incident once before, but now she was the unfortunate victim dragged into that story. This incident turned more positive among the high society and was obviously passed on by word of mouth as something grand. Marquis Alexio did not understand how the aristocracy could curse a man, mistaking him for a murderer, and now willingly call it the love of the age. Fortunately, Lady Roland had returned healthy and unharmed, but the man did not understand how the demons had been able to quietly sneak into his domain and kidnap her. Nevan acted very cautiously, as there was no news of the demons' capture, which meant that they were still not free. Suddenly Cornelia approached the Marquis, making him speechless. The man loudly began to ask where she had been missing all this time, and if she had any idea how long he had been looking for her. The girl had disappeared and hadn't contacted Asher for 2 whole years. Cornelia realized that the man was surprised, but she still asked him to speak a little quieter. The man didn't care about that, and the girl started to go from there. She hated causing trouble and becoming the subject of further gossip. The Marquis wanted to stop the girl with all his might, because they had not seen each other for 2 years. Cornelia said that she came back because of Dante, after which she called the man to go to see the Duke and his beloved. Betty came to the girl's room, for it had been a long time since her dinner, and she was not yet ready. Roland asked her to wait a while she wrote the letter and then come down. The maid assured her that the girl couldn't treat the food like that, as she still needed to recover. The heroine realized that Betty had become overprotective of her after she returned. She considered it her fault, so now she had no choice. After the girl was rescued by Duke, the temple supporters asked Roland to be present to help with the investigation. Be that as it may, Dante noted that she had been kidnapped by demons for a long time and had physical and spiritual wounds, so she wouldn't be able to show her face anytime soon. In addition, the man promised to bring Roland back to the territory to recover faster. The girl didn't want to worry about Nevan, so it was better for her to return home. However, she couldn't forget Icarus's words about her father. No matter how hard the heroine tried, she still couldn't find one, so she might have missed this opportunity. Betty hurried the girl as the Duke was due to arrive soon, so she should start preparing now. Since that day, Roland and the Duke hadn't had time to talk in person. Because of the situation with Nevan, he was very busy all the time, which was why it was very awkward for her to see him now. The man offered to eat first, for he had heard that the girl hadn't eaten anything yet. Roland sat depressed, so Dante thought she didn't like the food and should ask for something else to be prepared. The Duke asked to say anything the heroine didn't like. The girl wondered if the man's concern was due to the fact that she was a special person, and if he was worried about other special people as well. Like Nevan had said, Dante fought for special people, so it made no sense for him to worry about someone like Roland. The girl said that she hadn't had a chance to talk to the Duke all this time, so it was now that she had to thank him for saving her. The man assured that the rescue had been a matter of course, in which case Nevan had been targeting Dante and had also hurt the girl. It was good for the Duke that at least it was safe here, however, he thought it was better for the girl to go back to her territory. Like she said before, Roland didn't want to go back there, as she still had some things to finish. The man wanted to help her with things, but the girl refused, as she didn't want to bother Dante anymore. In any case, the ball was over, so they should have stopped playing lovers. The heroine could not continue to stay here, receiving the Duke's help. Dante assured that he would help the girl as much as he could. Roland didn't understand why the Duke was helping her. They had no relationship from that point on, and the more Dante got involved with the girl, the harder it was for him, so the Duke had no reason to continue helping her. The girl wanted to learn more about the man. The priests didn't understand how the man dared refuse to stand trial, thinking they should take drastic action. The ministers thought that Dante was looking down on them, simply because he had found demons and Nevan Castle. Libet wasn't so sure about that, saying they should have left the man alone for now. The priests did not understand how such a thing could be allowed to happen. If they stood idly by, the Duke would not take the church seriously and would continue to do as he pleased. Libet assured them that the men were wrong, for Dante van Benerit was the one who had been personally created the third high priest. Libertus was sick of hearing priests overstepping their bounds by saying such things about something that belonged to him. The men apologized for their unworthy behavior and walked out the temple door. The priests didn't understand where the priest got such powerful energy at such a young age that they were helpless in front of him. The man told of rumors that Libertus was much older than he looked. Also, the emperor was quite stingy with him, so they must not have been on the priest's blacklist. This was where the scary rumors about the priest came from, for he had lived in the temple of Eor since it had been built thousands of years ago. Libertus thought about Dante and how much effort it took to finish that masterpiece, so he couldn't imagine how he dared to disobey the priest. The man began to think that Roland was really important to him, though on the other hand, it couldn't be love and all that sort of thing. Over breakfast, the heroine asked the Duke to tell her what the reason was for him helping her. All the man wanted was only that Roland was no longer in danger. Dante didn't want the girl to have anything to do with the church and Nevan to just live a quiet life. The Duke thought he could easily figure out about the church's interest in the girl, but with Nevan, it was a different story. Roland had been in danger not once, but twice, and it was not to happen again. Dante began to say that he had the same feelings that the girl had had when she had tried to save him. Since he had gotten the girl's help, she could even hesitate to ask for the same. The heroine wanted to speak out, but suddenly Cornelia burst in on them. Escher began to assure that the girl should not have burst in so suddenly. Cornelia saw Roland and immediately realized that it was the Duke's lover, after which she decided to get to know her better. The Marquis asked the girl to calm down, for she made heroine very uncomfortable. Roland asked not to apologize, because she was happy to meet Dante's friend. Escher didn't understand what the girl had been doing all this time, that she had become even wilder than before. The Duke said that if they continued like this, he would just kick them out. Dante apologized to Roland, telling her to go back to her room while he got rid of his longtime friends. The girl realized that they were very close, so she decided to leave to give them a chance to talk to each other. On the way to the room, the heroine met Asher. The man explained that Cornelia had thrown him out, citing a private conversation with Dante, and anyway, he was ashamed that the girl had seen such a side of him. To Roland, it actually seemed very nice. After all, it was cool to have childhood friends. The Marquis thanked the girl and decided to walk her to her room, since he was thrown out anyway. Roland didn't remember Cornelia. Then the man explained that she had disappeared 2 years ago and had only now returned. No one knew what she had been doing all this time. The Duke had told Cornelia that even though they were close, she had behaved too roughly. Now that everyone was gone, the girl ordered Dante to undress. The man did not understand what she meant. Cornelia unbuttoned the Duke's shirt and made sure to confirm her hunch that the man was in complete chaos. Dante began to ask what it all meant. It seemed to him that the girl had forgotten all norms of propriety while studying abroad in Florence. Cornelia demanded that he not dodge the answer, for she had warned the Duke that it was better not to use Ioshita's power, for that sword wore out the body every time it was used. The girl heard about the incident with the demon race at the royal ball, so she immediately rushed here. As expected, things had gotten serious with the Duke's body. Cornelia reminded Dante that this was not a case that could simply be ignored, because if you let things go, then the Duke would die. The man said it wasn't that bad. Then the girl called him crazy because he wouldn't let her examine him, and so he could just die. Cornelia assured her that things were getting much worse, and the Duke should not have been so indifferent. Fortunately, the girl's family was known in medicine and was able to study Dante's symptoms. No matter how much Cornelia dug through the books, she found no useful information, so she concluded that the Duke's condition was related to divine power and was not an ordinary illness. The girl remembered that this fork was the only place Cecil had been before. Dante had confirmed that it was the only place where her footprints remained. Ioshita had to be sealed again, as she would continue to take Dante's divine power as payment for the use of her power. Cornelia held out to the Duke her family's special anesthetic that she had recently improved. Judging by the man's condition, he would need it soon. It was to be diluted and used as usual. The girl had promised to monitor Dante's condition for a few days, so he would just have to do as she said. In her room, Roland remembered Duke's words and how he was very calm. In the corridor, she ran into Cornelia, who told her that Dante had an urgent matter, so she might not be able to meet him. The girl felt sorry that they still couldn't talk, so she called Heroine to take a little walk. In the garden, Cornelia was surprised at the growth of the calla tree, for it used to be from her height. The girl said that though she did not visit this place often, it was always with her when Cecil was here. It was perhaps the first time anyone had been near this tree other than Cornelia and Asher. When Cecil left, Dante stopped coming here. Roland didn't think this place was so special, but she still wondered who Cecil was. As Cornelia thought the girl had heard about her for the first time, and knowing Dante, he would never tell Heroine. The girl saw that Roland was especially important to the Duke, so she decided to tell everything she knew about the man. Cecilia Run Benerit was a direct descendant of the Benerit family, but she was isolated from the world shortly after her birth. The girl was Dante's twin sister,